Hello everyone. If you are new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do it, thanks. By the way, I also have a Luffy fan fiction channel. If you are interested, the link is in the description. Dragonslayer by KitsuneDragon. He said he saw great potential in my small body and he raised me. Because of him I lived, I learned, and I finally found someone I could call friend, even if he didn't call me the same. I am his son. I am his student, the Dragonslayer of Aknologia. I don't own anything. Adios.
Sacred Grove, Tenro Island. What? Levi-chan. Gajeel. Lucy's brown eyes widened in tandem with her dropping jaw. How did you even get here? The Guardians shouldn't have even let you in here? What are you talking about? The black-haired Dragonslayer tilted his head in confusion. We just came from the west and got through a bunch of trees and shit. Kana, Lucy and Loke turned to each other with deadpan expressions. We did that entire challenge by the Guardians. For nothing, they thought in unison. Can't focus on that right now. Kana muttered to herself as she took a deep breath to calm the feelings of annoyance and anger that began to rise within her system. Anyway, Gajeel, Levi. Look, you're Nakama. Levi, I love you, and Gajeel, you're a person? Well, that's one way to put it. The son of Metallicana sweat dropped. But I'm telling you this now. Kana placed a hand on her card case in her version of what could be considered a threat. Back away now and this won't have to end up being a fight. There was a period of silence between the two parties, but Levi was surprisingly the one to break it as she immediately cast a glance to her partner out of the corner of her vision. Gajeel. Tetsuryu no Hoko. Gajeel inhaled deeply as magic energy collected within his lungs. His body began to swell before he unleashed the vortex of razor-sharp iron shards that tore the ground asunder as it made its way towards its intended targets. Regulus impact. Loke's fist glowed with golden light before he punched the air. A powerful burst of light blazed through the air before morphing into the image of a roaring lion head. The two spells collided before generating a powerful explosion that quickly dispersed from the accompanying shockwave. Levi-chan. Lucy looked at her female best friend in shock. Kana was just as surprised, but she didn't let it show as openly as Lucy did. So you're serious about this, huh, Levi? That's right. The blue-haired mage nodded her head. The atmosphere was permeated with a tension so thick that Gajeel's chainsaw-bladed arm could have cut through it. 4 pairs of eyes constantly looked between each other and the lacrima that lay off to the side. Its golden form made sure to keep everyone aware of it as it shone in the light of the afternoon sun and Loke's glowing fists. I'm sorry, Lu-chan, but I can't let you have that lacrima. Levi-chan. Lucy frowned at her guildmate. We don't want to fight. Then hand over the lacrima and we can go our separate ways. Gajeel jumped in, his crimson eyes still focused on the celestial spirit. You know that Lucy and I won't let that happen, Gajeel. Kana shook her head as she reached to her deck of cards. We need to finish these trials. And so do we. The solid script magic user replied. I don't want to fight you both either, Lu-chan, Kana, but I will if I have to. I know I'm not much of a fighter, but I made a promise that if I'm gonna go down, then I'm going down swinging. Jihi. The Iron Dragonslayer gave a nod of approval as he met the younger mage's gaze out of his peripheral vision. Fucking great quote, Squirt. Vanity does not become you, Gajeel. Levi rolled her eyes in exasperation. The small smile that graced her features then fell away as she turned her gaze back on her guildmates and Loke. So what's your choice? Lucy and Kana frowned as they looked between each other and Levi. The anguish and conflict was paramount in their expressions, but in the end, they released sighs of defeat as they turned back to the blue-haired S-class candidate. Kana raised up a trio of cards while Lucy withdrew her bow staff from her requibbed pocket dimension. Well, alright then. Gajeel nodded as he raised his sword arm and assumed a combat stance. Just be sure not to cry when I shred that mane of yours, you mangy furball. Oh, a derogatory feline term towards the lion spirit. Loke responded with a dry tone. How original. The two males snarled at one another as the wind blew softly between them. Loke was cloaked in aura of golden light and Gajeel was outlined in emerald magic energy as they shifted their feet slightly, watching and waiting for the other to make the first move. But what caught the party of 3 off guard was when Levi was actually the one to make the pilot attack. Insert music. RWBYI may fall, solid script. Shine. The word shine was spelled out in vibrant letters before they immediately grew brighter, encompassing the ruins of the sacred grove in a shroud of light. Lucy and Kana released cries of surprise as they were forced to shield their eyes from the intense burst of light. The ground cracked beneath Gajeel's feet as he pushed off with a great amount of force, rushing towards the lacrima. He stretched his arm out, his fingertips already mere centimeters away from scooping the golden orb in his grasp. Crimson eyes narrowed in annoyance as his ears twitched and a flash of gold appeared in the corner of his vision. Regulus impact, Tetsurykon. The lacrima went soaring through the air from the resulting shockwave as a fist encased in light crashed against the face of the iron club that Gajil's arm had become. The ground shuddered as a spiderweb of cracks raced across the battlefield, dragon and lion snarling at one another. You really think you can handle the son of a dragon, kitty cat? I have been fighting since before you were even born, Gajil. Lok snorted in amusement. I should be the one asking you if you can handle me. Bullshit. With a roar, Gajil extended his iron club arm and pushed the lion spirit back. Lok gritted his teeth as he dug his shoes into the dirt to try and slow his momentum. Gajil had to give credit to the brown-haired man. Even as he was slammed through a boulder, he remained standing in an effort to push against Gajil's arm. Regulus flash. Lok's body was enveloped in a burst of light before jumping to the side and out of the way of the Iron Dragonslayer's still extending arm. The ground bore a massive scar as the wielder of the light of Regulus raced across the battlefield towards his opponent. Solid script. Wall. Levi pointed swiped her magic pen as she stood behind Gajil and flung the letters down in front of her trial partner. The letters immediately grew to a significantly large size, becoming a literal wall between the two juggernauts of combat. That won't stop me, Levi, Lok exclaimed as he unleashed a devastating punch. The letter A and the first L bore the brunt of the impact as they cracked heavily before shattering into tiny pieces. The light-encased punch continued its course, but the son of Metallicana quickly twisted his body. The rush of wind showcased just how swift the blow had been, but Gajil did not let that deter him as he grabbed the celestial spirit by his wrist and proceeded to turn around and jam his hip up against Lok's opposing hip. With a grunt of effort, the Iron Dragonslayer lifted Lok off of his feet and proceeded to pull the brown-haired man by his arm. Earth met sky for a brief moment as Lok was flipped over Gajil's shoulder with the intent of being painfully slammed into the unforgiving earth. But the lion spirit would have none of it as he adjusted his legs and the ground cracked as he slammed his feet down to regain stability. Lok quickly spun around and freed himself from the Iron Dragonslayer's grasp and lashed out with a light-infused kick that dug into the black-haired mage's belly. Gajil grunted as he was sent skidding backwards from the strike. Regulus force. Lok reared his arm back before slamming it down on the ground. A streak of golden light tore the ground asunder as it raced towards the Iron Dragonslayer, but said Dragonslayer quickly flared his magic energy in response. Tetsuryu no Yuroko. In a flash of emerald light, skin was replaced with steel-colored scales. The powerful blast of light crashed into Gajil's body, but the man was tougher and heavier than he was before. With the scales of an iron dragon, he was comparable to being the immovable objible force. Gonna have to try harder than that to get the drop on me, Leo. I don't have to. Lok smirked. They will. Enhanced hearing picked up on the sound of an object whistling through the air and the Iron Dragonslayer glanced upwards as he saw what looked like 3 playing cards now present in the air above him. Card magic. Thunderbolt's fate. Kana shouted. Due to Gajil currently being cloaked in metallic scales, the bolt of electrical charge from Kana's spell was immediately drawn towards him like a moth to a flame. Oh fuck. Crimson eyes widened as the bolt approached him at a breakneck pace. Don't worry, Levi announced as she rode at a pace she had never thought she was capable of. Solid script. Rubber. The word materialized above Gajil's head, forged of the very substance that it spelled out. The bolt of lightning that Kana had summoned was rendered useless as a result of the electrical insulator. Kana's eyes widened as she looked over to Levi, a proud smirk present on the brunette's face. Hell yeah. That's my partner, that's right. You should praise me for helping you out. Levi stuttered while blushing in embarrassment. Receiving praise from the son of Metallicana was not something she was expecting after all. I'll support you during the fight, Gajil. I'll keep them in check. Jihehe. A toothy grin stretched its way across the Dragonslayer's face. I'm in your hands, Squirt. Don't be so sure you're winning just because you're holding back Kana and Lok. Levi-chan. Luce's words alerted her pair of opponents to the fact that there was an objective in mind during this battle. Squirt, Blondie's got something underground, Gajil shouted as he picked up on the vibrations beneath his feet and the sound of shifting stone. The lacrima. Levi and Gajil's heads snapped in the direction of the golden spheroid where they saw the ground was now being broken apart. Unleashing herself from the tunnel she dug, the pink-haired maid that was Virgo sprang out of the ground like a rabbit out of its burrow. I have it, Heim. Virgo stated before preparing to drop back down into the hole she had dug. Squirt. Stop her, right? Levi nodded stiffly. Solid script. Floor. The letters FLOOR materialized in a burst of magic as an orange magic seal appeared beneath Virgo's feet. Due to the spell obstructing her return to the subterranean escape route she had planned to take, the blue-eyed spirit found herself colliding face first with the solidified form of a written word. Ah. The expression of surprise was not reflected in the monotonous tone of Virgo's voice as she watched the orb arc through the air. Heim, I seem to have lost the lacrima. To an outside party, The sight of a maid slamming into a floor after performing an apparent swan diving motion would always be humorous. Unfortunately for her master and her master's partner, they currently did not share in that opinion. Shit. Solid script. Whip. The solidified letters merged to form the handle of the whip before Levi let loose a tendril of pure orange eternano. The whip snaked its way through the air, lengthening extensively before wrapping itself around the golden orb. Got it. Oh no you don't, Lucy exclaimed as she raised her bow staff overhead. Power pole extend. The wooden weapon accepted the magic energy that was pumped into its cylindrical form before extending to great lengths. It was Levi's time to release a single word of profanity as the wooden staff slammed down on the eternano whip, halting its motion to return to Levi. Due to the lack of tensile strength, the whip lost its grip on the lacrima and once more in the grasp of the wind. That eventually became a literal event as Kana hurled a card through the air. Card magic. Wind edge. The card was thrown with expert precision, arcing through the air before glowing to release a gust of wind that blew the lacrima in the direction of the card magic user. Come to mama. Like hell. Gajil's roar of defiance echoed across the battlefield as he quickly pushed past Loki and jumped for the lacrima. Virgo, stop him. Yes, Heim. The monotonous voice replied. With an explosive release of her tensed leg muscles, the celestial spirit of the Virgin tore across the battlefield before swinging her arms forwards. The chains wrapped around her wrists were flung forth before wrapping themselves around the Iron Dragonslayer's wrists before the lacrimal could fall into his waiting hands. What the foo, huh? Virgo exclaimed as she swung the son of Metallicana back to ground zero. But the red-eyed man was quick to recover as he quickly went into a front flip. The ground cratered from the force of the impact as he secured a stable landing on his feet. You think chains are enough to hold me back? Bitch. I eat this shit for breakfast. True to his word, the Dragonslayer bared his fangs and with a loud chomp, bit through the chain links that were around his hands and wrists. The moment he was free, the Iron Dragonslayer was ready to spring into action and intercept the soaring lacrima once more, but he was again obstructed in his quest as Loki appeared in front of his face. The oncoming fist glowed before the light morphed into the image of a roaring lion head. Regulus impact. The pain from the attack was reduced due to wearing the Iron Dragon's scales, but the force of the attack had not lessened and Gajil found himself flying towards his partner. Got it. Kana whooped as the lacrima fell securely into her hands. Nice save, Loke. Lucy clapped her hands excitedly for the tuxedo-clad spirit. I aim to please. The brown-haired male bent forwards in a dramatic bow before turning back to Gajil and Levi. As a part of Fairy Tail for a number of years, Loke was well aware of the legendary tenacity of its guild members and so he knew that a single punch wouldn't be enough to put down the son of Metallicana. Out of the way, Levi. The members of Team Kana were all shell-shocked at the maneuver Gajil had just performed. His momentum was not slowing down in the slightest, even after he had converted one of his arms into an iron club to stab into the ground, and thus he was put on a collision course with his partner. Levi had not replied as her brown eyes shifted between Gajil, the heir and Kana holding the lacrima. The gears in her head spun at an incredible pace before she nodded her head and stepped a bit to the side. Gajil. Throw me. Red eyes widened as he continued to speed towards his partner, but he immediately caught her plan and nodded. Gihi. His free arm immediately stretched forth and grabbed onto Levi's small forearm. Pivot. Utilizing his arm, shoulder and abdominal muscles, Gajil released a cry of effort as he forced his body to resist the forward momentum. Capitalizing on the cylindrical shape of the iron club that was his arm, the pair of S-class trial candidates found the world becoming a whirlwind of color as they spun around at a dizzying pace. Now, go. Levi. His arm muscles bulged and on Levi's mark, the iron-eating mage hurled the blue-haired girl through the air. The wind roared in Levi's ears and tears leaked from the corners of her eyes as she rose high into the air. She felt her body beginning to reach the apex of its ascent, the air resistance dropping slightly. Leave it to me. Levi made sure to back up her words by scribbling another word in the air. Solid script. Hammer. The letters AMMER fused together to become a 6-foot-long handle while the H enlarged to become as large as a small boulder. Doria. Levi was never very physically strong. Her lithe form was not built for power, but she had run the calculations through her head in that brief moment that Gajil had been sent to collide with her. Her angle of descent combined with the weight of the hammer she wielded, it would be enough. Physics was on her side. With her battle cry echoing through the atmosphere, Levi let her arms fall as the weight of the hammer head was coupled with gravity. She swung the hammer. Auburn-haired woman's eyes widened as she raised her arms in a feeble form of defense. Loke. On it. His master's unspoken orders were followed and in a flash of golden light, Loke appeared in front of Kana and raised his arms to block the strike. However, his golden brown eyes widened in shock as the force of the hammer strike bore down on him. So heavy. The force traversed through his body and the ground shuddered and shook before depressing. In an instant, the celestial spirit of the lion was now standing in the center of a sizable crater. A crater formed by a tiny blue-haired girl who had never wielded an actual weapon in her life. Gajiel. A resounding clang echoed across the battleground and Loke's eyes widened as his blow was effectively nullified in the presence of the man who was now cloaked in the scales of an iron dragon. With a toothy grin, the red-eyed Dragonslayer clenched his hand into a tight fist before crashing a swift uppercut into the lion spirit's belly. Loke's eyes widened, releasing a gasp of pain as spittle flew from his mouth. The blow lifted him off of his feet before another uppercut sent the celestial spirit higher into the air. Gajiel spun on his toes to drive his heel into the lion spirit's rib cage. Loke's body bent into an almost perfect crescent shape before the Iron Dragonslayer's spin kick sent him flying off to the side. With the lion spirit no longer barring his path, the son of Metallicana charged towards his opponents. The lacrima was in his sights and his red eyes shone as a victorious grin stretched across his face. He stretched out his claws of iron, intent on snatching the gold-colored orb out of Kana's grasp. Gee, we win. That's what you think. Red eyes caught onto a shift of motion in their peripheries, and Gajiel watched as Kana revealed the set of cards she had been hiding behind her back. Sneaky bitch. Card magic. Thunderbolt's fate. The flash of golden light came with a crack of thunder and the bolt erupted out of the magic seal that appeared between its caster and her opponent. The spell slammed into Gajiel, sending him careening through the air. The Iron Dragonslayer quickly went with the motion and performed a backflip to land deftly back onto his feet beside Levi, but Kana didn't stop there as she withdrew 4 more cards. 3 swords held in reverse and the image of a halo of light. Card magic. Swords of revealing light. A magic seal sprung to life above the heads of the solid script mage and her Dragonslayer partner. From the massive circle came 3 massive swords made of blinding light, each sword as large as an elephant and seemed almost as sharp as a wyvern's fangs. Gajiel's body moved before his mind could ever process the current state of events. He knew his scales could take the amount of damage from Kana's spell with ease, but Levi would never be able to react in time to form a shield. The swords were falling too quickly and not to mention the light was so bright that the brunette had reflexively raised her arms to shield her eyes. Levi. Gajiel quickly pushed the brunette down on the ground, shielding her with his larger body as 3 massive swords made of blinding light descended upon them. Gajiel. There was a blinding flash of light and a pulse of golden magic energy that completely encompassed their bodies. Gajiel's eyes were shut tight, his face contorted into a grimace in preparation for the impact of the swords against his body. The impact never came however, and the Iron Dragonslayer opened his eyes and glanced around to see the same look of confusion on his partner's face. Instead of laying within a smoking crater like they expected, the two were trapped in a pyramid of light forged by the swords of Kana's spell. Don't worry, those swords will hold you in there for 3 minutes at the most. Kana's shout was seemingly distant, but that was because she was already being scooped up and carried away by Loke as Virgo did the same with Lucy. You fought a good fight, Levi. I'd like to take you on one-on-one later, but I got too much riding on this. Later. Sorry, Levi-chan. Wait, oi. Levi ran up to the walls of the pyramid and pounded harshly against them, but they refused to budge. Gajiel. They're getting away. Gajiel was quiet as he watched the 4 escape into the thicket of Tenro's inner forest, and he continued to watch until they were completely lost from his field of vision. Gajiel. Why aren't you doing anything? Levi shouted at her partner. If this shield can only be held up for 3 minutes then there's obviously not a lot of magic energy put into it. You're strong enough to break through it. I know you can. Even if you can't do it in your base form, your drive mode should be more than enough too. Yeah. Gajiel nodded in confirmation. You're right. I can break this barrier, no problem. Then why won't you? Insert music. Naruto Shippuden man of the world. We lost, plain and simple. Wha. But Gajiel. I won't lie to you, Levi, we put up a good fight. And you did a lot more than I thought you were ever gonna do, especially when you pulled out that hammer swing. Gajiel chuckled as he patted her on the head. You got some fire in you, squirt. Why are you acting like this? After everything you said, after everything you made me believe, we're just giving up. Well, when you put it like that, it makes me sound like I lied to you. That's because that's exactly how it's sounding. Tears began to line Levi's eyes as she stomped towards the raven-haired Dragonslayer and pounded her fists against his chest. You told me to rely you. You said you'd make me big. You said you'd help to make me an S-class and that with you by my side there was no way that wasn't going to happen.
Well, look at where we are, Gajiel. We're both stuck in a light prison that you can fully well tear apart with your bare hands and all you can do is tell me that we lost. You made me believe in you, Gajiel. You told me to rely on you. Well, I'm relying on you to get us out so we can go after them, so we can win, but you won't even do that for some damned reason. So what happened to that promise? What happened to going down swinging? Yeah, the son of Metallicana replied as he scratched the back of his head nervously. You swung, squirt, and you missed. Levi paused in her blows against Gajiel's chest, brown eyes widening in confusion and shock at Gajiel's practically uncaring tone. What are you saying? Gajiel sighed. What I'm saying is that, yeah, I said all that shit about helping you and all that, and I really meant it. Honest, I did. The Iron Dragonslayer reaffirmed his stance as Levi's teary-eyed expression held an undertone of disbelief. But at the same time, this is your trial to become S-class, not mine. Master promotes all this friendship and teamwork and stuff, but at the end of the day, I'm not the one who's gonna be an S-class at the end of it all. You are. Crimson met Brown as he glanced down at her. You said you didn't have the drive to become S-class, nor did you ever think you would be nominated for the position, so as we were going through the fight against Kana and Heartfilia, well, I got some second thoughts. Second thoughts? Levi asked. Yeah, the Iron Dragonslayer sighed. I didn't want to basically help you get the rank and all of a sudden, you end up going on an S-class mission and then you get yourself killed.
No one else is gonna be able to think it, but Squirt, if you go out there in the world of S-class mages and you don't make it back, that's on me. Gajiel pointed an accusing finger against his chest. Like hell I'm gonna have that on my conscience. I don't want you to go into a fight thinking that you can't win a fight without me, and I'm sorry, Squirt, but if you're gonna end up having those kind of thoughts then you can't be S-class. A silence passed between the two as Levi watched Gajiel dead in the face, a myriad of emotions crossing across her own.
It hurt. To be told in so many words that Shibano hurt, but he was right. Gajiel Red Fox, for all his bullheadedness and idiocy, was absolutely right. She couldn't go into the line of work of an S-class mage with half-assed motives, and while she had the intellect of a genius, brains alone wasn't going to keep her alive. She always had Jet and Droy by her side, Team Shadowgear to the very end and all that jazz, and with these sets of trials, she now found herself relying on Gajiel. So would it be best then? Would it be best for her to call it quits as a mage like her alternate self in the woods said? Would it maybe be best to just be a librarian, get a husband and raise her children until she grew old?
She turned her head slightly, her eyes looking over her shoulder at where the blue symbol of her guild lay on her left shoulder blade. You're right. A dried chuckle escaped her lips. I can't be an S-class thinking I can't do things by myself. For all my smarts, I'd be an idiot to think I could be an S-class the way I am now. Squirt, but then that just means that I'm going to have to change myself and get stronger, right? Gajiel's eyes widened as a fire seemed to light itself within the short girl's brown orbs. I need to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. I want to be an S-class one day. Maybe I won't be one today. Maybe I won't be one next year or the year after, but I will work hard and I want to be an S-class mage one day. I want to be able to help the guild. I want to be of use to Master, to Lu-chan, to you, to everybody. So, if that day comes, even though I might be able to do stuff on my own, can I still rely on you, to be by my side and make it happen? Gajiel? Jihehe. He planted a firm hand atop her the solid script mage's head. You wouldn't even have to ask, Squirt. The blue-haired bookworm looked up at the taller mage and met his toothy grin with one of her own. Jihi. Insert music. Data Live Ground Zero, Sacred Grove, Tenro Island. With Gray and Juvia, Hyojin Maiku. Xerneas, the massive stag forged of ebony ice thundered across the reflective surface of the lake, but the crystalline quadruped was met with opposition from an identical construct forged from ivory ice. The two stags locked horns, pushing against one another like the actual animals they resembled, only to be shattered by the roar of a raging tide from the water Dragonslayer herself. Suiryu no Hoko. The raging vortex of water raced towards the seemingly evil versions of Gray and Juvia, but the dark form of the water Dragonslayer countered with her own water dragon's roar. The two mighty spells collided, the lake's surface churning wildly from the resulting shockwave before the two spells became a towering pillar of water. Taking advantage of the water pillar, the daughter of Levia reached out with her hydrokinetic abilities. Gravity no longer affected the water pillar and the single column of liquid diverged to become a multitude of whip-like tendrils. The two opponents quickly leapt to the side and out of the path of Juvia's spell. The pair of crimson-eyed wraiths landed back on the water's surface, but the daughter of Levia gave them no quarter as tendrils of pressurized water rose from depths of the lake, steam wafting through the air as Juvia manipulated their temperatures to become boiling hot. Ha! With a shout from their master, the water tendrils struck like serpents with the intent of boiling their targets alive. Dark Gray was quick to prevent such an outcome as the wraith summoned forth a wall of white ice, blocking the oncoming tendrils. Juvia's eyes narrowed in annoyance as she continued to bombard the defensive structure with blasts of boiling pressurized water before deciding to merge the multitude of blasts into one single concentrated burst. The ice wall began to take on a spiderweb of cracks before it was blasted apart into pieces. However, the spell was completely overwhelmed in the face of Dark Juvia's counterattack in the form of a massive tidal wave. Hyojin no Dogu. Gray took a stance before the magic made natural disaster before inhaling deeply. Ice and Eternano built up within his lungs before he unleashed the ice god's bellow. The concentrated vortex of ebony ice crashed against the tsunami and in an instant, the waters froze. However, Gray didn't stop there as he forged a massive blade out of the merged magic of his patron goddess and his own ice-make magic. Hyojin Maiku. Cold Excalibur. His sword was swung in a downward vertical slash, the motion being so quick that it appeared as if the blade had become a flash. The wall of frozen water was bisected before he slammed his hands down on the water's surface. Ice-make. Frost Giant. A pair of massive gauntlets forged from bright blue ice erupted out of the magic seals which sprung to life beneath the two makeshift glaciers, grasping said glaciers in their tight grips as if they were weapons. With a mighty roar, Gray made a swinging motion and the Frost Giant spell mimicked his actions and brought the two blocks of ebony down upon their targets. Dark Gray countered by forging his own gargantuan ice gauntlets, and with a mere raising of his arms, the gauntlets responded and caught the oncoming weapons. A powerful shockwave raced out from the point of contact before Dark Gray's eyes shone with malicious intent. The gauntlets of the mirror wraith squeezed tighter before bending the ice pillars and snapped them in half. Both Greys immediately reacted and hurled their respective pieces of ice at one another. The four projectiles crashed against each other with explosive impact, reducing each other to glittering ice shards that fell upon the lake like a hailstorm. In an attempt to use the Greys' attacks as a distraction, Juvia vanished beneath the water's surface and took off through its murky depths. However, the blue-eyed Dragonslayer was caught by surprise when she saw crimson eyes with vertical slit pupils staring back at her. "You may be identical to Juvia, but can you keep up with her in her own domain?" Juvia roared. Her dark clone did not respond and merely unleashed a battle cry of its own. The female Dragonslayer and her wraith battled for dominance, lashing out with claws and fangs of hard water with such vigor that the once calm lake surface was becoming as rough as the waves of the sea during a storm. Waves rose and fell, crashing against the spiky rocks that were scattered throughout the illusionary battleground before the lake's surface bulged like an expanding bubble. And like a bubble, the surface tension was broken and it popped to reveal the original Juvia had been the victor of the underwater bout from delivering a mighty uppercut. With claws of water wrapped securely around her dark self's ankles, Juvia followed up by spinning Dark Juvia around like a top before hurling the wraith towards Dark Gray. Dark Juvia and Gray were sent beneath the lake before Juvia deftly on her feet beside her chosen mate. Blue and black eyes never left the spot where the two wraiths vanished beneath the waves, and Juvia's senses were stretched to their maximum as she aimed to make sure there would be no surprise attacks. "They are mimicking us, Gray-sama." Stating the obvious, Juvia. Gray replied with a slightly annoyed tone. "We need to find a way to get ahead of them so we can beat them and get the hell out of here." Juvia believes an immobilization maneuver might be most effective. Juvia wishes to employ something similar to what she and her Haku-san performed when fighting the Jubi in Edalis. "I wasn't there for the majority of that battle, but if you've got a plan then I'll follow your lead." Understood. The moment Juvia had replied, the two mirror wraiths had decided to show themselves. "What the?" The two fairy tale mages looked over their shoulders, their eyes wide with surprise as both Dark Gray and Dark Juvia emerged out of the shadows of their original selves. There was no shift in the water nor a pulse of magic energy, they simply appeared. Twin waves of ice and water rushed forth from their hands and both Gray and Juvie through the air. The Ice Godslayer and Water Dragonslayer bounced across the surface of the lake as if it were solid ground, but managed to right themselves, the waters rippling heavily as they skidded across the lake. "Ice make. Geyser," Gray roared as he summoned forth his magic. A spiked geyser of ice erupted out of the magic seal that formed beneath the feet of both his opponents, sending them both sky high. Seeing as they would have no way to dodge while in the air, Juvia struck as the lake swirled beneath her feet. Suiryu no Kobaku. Multiple tendrils of water jetted out of the lake's depths before morphing into the likeliness of crimson-eyed water dragons, their fangs bared to bite down upon the airborne wraiths. Dark Juvia and Dark Gray's own red eyes watched as the bite of the water dragon spell raced towards them, but Dark Gray unleashed a pulse of freezing magic and the water dragons were flash frozen, becoming frozen trails of ivory as a result. Gravity took hold of the two mirror wraiths as they landed atop two of the frozen water dragons and slid down their lengthy forms towards their targets. As he slid down, Dark Gray planted his right fist in his left palm, mimicking the original Gray's stance for his ice make magic. A whitish-blue magical seal was forged above Dark Gray's head before unleashing a barrage of ice spikes that rained down upon the two fairy tale mages. "Shit!" Gray cursed. He and Juvia were quick to perform a myriad of evasive maneuvers in order to prevent themselves from being impaled on the business ends of the oncoming projectiles. Cartwheels, backflips, ducks and rolls. The two performed basically every single gymnastic motion they could perform only to be halted as Dark Juvia forced the waters to swirl beneath them, entrapping her targets in a raging typhoon. For a master of the waves like Juvia, the vortex would have child's play to take down, but the Water Dragonslayer was not given a chance to do so as a massive shadow encompassed both her and Gray. Obsidian and sapphire eyes widened as they glanced heavenward in time to see the falling pillar of white ice which Dark Gray forged. Insert music. Saint Seiya Saint Legend. Woda Doraibo. With a massive pulse of magic energy, Juvia was encased in the scales of her drive mode. Through mere physical might, Juvia unleashed a powerful fist that shattered the ice pillar. Gray's eyes widened, and for a brief moment, Juvia seemed almost otherworldly to him. The way her hair flowed like the waves of the ocean, the way her scale-like markings glittered in the light of the falling ice shards, and her eyes. Damn, those pools of ocean blue were so dark he could probably get lost in them. Suiryu no Suirou. The liquid moved as if it were an extension of her very being, and dark Juvia and dark Gray found themselves trapped within the water dragon's water prison spell. Gray-sama, now. Huh? Oh. Gray blinked rapidly as his synapses finally decided to connect. A small blush dusted his cheeks, but was he ever glad that Juvia wasn't paying attention to his staring, right? Ice make. Freeze, slamming his hands down on the water, ice blue magic seals formed beneath the feet of his and Juvia's dark selves. The orbs of water which they were encased in were flash frozen, and the moment they were, Juvia sped across the lake's surface. Her eyes seemed to glow with power and her body morphed into pure water as she drew ever closer to the dark wraiths. With the power of the water dragon, she was practically unstoppable. She was as untamable as the raging tides themselves, for she was the raging tide. Metsuryu Ougi. Suiryu no Araumi. With the appearance and power of a literal tidal wave, Juvia crashed down upon the frozen forms of dark Gray and dark Juvia, crushing their forms and reducing them to mere wisps of shadow. Whoa. He was awestruck. When Gray first fought her during the Guild War, back when she was a part of Phantom Lord, he thought she was undoubtedly one of the strongest mages he had ever fought, and beating her was something of a miracle to him. The magic of the ice goddess, Shiva, had earned him that win, but looking at her now, using the very secret Dragonslayer art spell he had somehow managed to overcome, Gray knew then and there that Juvia Loxer had held back against him in that fight. Juvia emerged from the waters directly in front of him and greeted him with a fanged grin, the golden lacrima held securely in her clawed hands. Gray blinked, and in an instant, the illusion of the mist-covered lake was replaced with the reality of the forests of Tenro Island. Hee, Gray-sama, we did it. The majestic power of her water drive fell away as she reverted to her base form. Now Juvia and Gray-sama can move on to the final part of the trials. The water Dragonslayer then proceeded to drag her beloved along by the hand through the sacred grove. Gray-sama, Juvia took note of the ice godslayer's seemingly deafening silence. Gray-sama, are you okay? Huh? Gray shook his head from side to side as he regained his bearings. Yeah, I'm fine, Juvia, just. Are you upset? Upset? Gray became a bit more puzzled at the question posed by his trial partner. Why would I be upset? Well, the blue-haired mage fidgeted nervously, a complete 180 compared to the confidence she revealed during the fight. Juvia was still holding back throughout the fight, and if Juvia used Wotodoribu earlier in the fight, we could have won a lot faster and Gray-sama wouldn't have gotten as hurt. Oh no, not at all. That's not the reason at all, Gray scratched the back of his neck nervously. I was kind of blown away by how strong you've gotten over the past few months since you've joined Fairy Tail. It was pretty cool, you know. Oh, Juvia's eyes widened before she giggled like a schoolgirl. So Gray-sama is beginning to realize his true feelings for Juvia. The feelings of love are blossoming and Juvia is finally melting the cold, icy exterior. You're a hopeless romantic, you annoying woman. The ice godslayer muttered as the female mage's smug look was shoved in his face. Or maybe it's because you are a bit afraid that you wouldn't be. It's okay, Gray-sama. Juvia stood ramrod straight as she planted a fist against her ample bosom in confidence. While we will possibly be facing strong foes like Natsu-san, Natsu-san's fire will not best Juvia's water. Juvia will not let anyone else beat you. Juvia swears it. The dark-haired ice godslayer stared at the blue-haired mage for a few seconds before breaking out into a fit of laughter. He walked up to the daughter of Levia and wrapped an arm firmly around her shoulders. You're incredible, you know that? Her pale skin turned as crimson as the hair of a certain Titania. GG Gray SS-sama. WWH, what's gotten into you? Nothing, just realizing that I got the best guildmate as my trial partner. Gray grinned widely. I am definitely going to treat you to whatever you want for that date when this is over. What? Ever. I want. Yup. Really. Juvia's head snapped up, looking straight into Gray's eyes. Her breathing became somewhat labored and her draconian features seemed to become a bit more pronounced as her eyes bore the glint of a predator staring at its prey. Juvia is not simply hearing things. Juvia is allowed to request whatever she wishes of Gray-sama for their date. Ooh. Gray gulped as he suddenly felt his heart racing in his chest for some inexplicable reason. Yes? And for some reason, the moment he said that word, he somehow felt as if he had dug himself into a massive hole he would not be able to get out of. Mavis Vermillion's grave, Tenro Island. The third master of Fairy Tail sat before the white marble which made up of the gravestone of his guild's first master. Years of weathering the forces of nature made the once glistening stone somewhat eroded and covered in moss and foliage, but there was still a seemingly majestic presence the gravestone exhumed. Makarov P.S. is grave and smiled.
Your guild has become quite a thing. First, I hope your spirit continues to guide them throughout these trials, and protect them during the perils they will eventually face. The dwarf rose up from his cross-legged position and held his staff firmly as he turned away from the gravestone. As he did, the sounds of the rustling foliage met his ears. Emerging from the brush, the shines of golden lacrimas appeared to be just as bright as the fires of determination and victory which were found in the eyes of the 4 young mages he considered his children.
Kana and Lucy. Gray and Juvia. Makarov nodded with a proud smile upon his wrinkled face. You've done well to make it this far. Master, Lucy blinked in confusion. What are you doing here? Are you going to be a part of the final trial? Kana jumped in. The dwarf shook his head in denial. You could not be more wrong, Kana-chan. I'm just here as the welcoming committee for you 6. Well, especially given how Mira, Urza and Gildarts were pretty much telling us how the second part of the trials involved using our heads, that means Levi and Gajeel should be showing up pretty soon then. Gray stated with a matter-of-fact tone. Actually, Fairy Tale's resident drunkard folded her arms beneath her chest, puffing out said ample bosom in pride. Lucy and I were able to handle those 2 and retrieve the lacrima from them. A shocked expression came across Gray and Juvia's faces as they looked between Kana and Lucy, practically doing a triple, nay, a quadruple take, to personify their surprise. How'd you guys manage to outwit someone as bright as Levi-san? Juvia exclaimed. Or better yet, how did you manage to overcome Gajeel-san in a battle? Your faith in our abilities and heartwarming. The celestial spirit mage deadpanned at her slayer mage guildmates. But if you should know, Kana and I were just as quick thinking to be able to outwit Levi-chan. However, I will admit, she had us on the ropes for a bit, and if Gajeel hadn't been holding back as much as he did, they probably would be the ones here instead of us. Ah, Gajeel-san held back. Juvia nodded in understanding before her brows furrowed in further confusion. Why would Gajeel-san hold back? That is very unlike him. Maybe he finally learned some self-restraint when fighting against Nakama. Gray's suggestion was met with multiple shoulder shrugs. Well, I gotta say, I underestimated you then, Kana. Lucy. First you passed by Gildarts and now you handled Gajeel's brawn and Levi's brains? It's a shame after coming all this way that Juvia and I are gonna have to take the S-class rank away from you. Oh ho, you wanna go tough guy? Kana cracked his knuckles in anticipation. Don't think just because you got a Dragonslayer on your side doesn't mean we don't have plans to handle you. Those are big words, Kana-san. Juvia's eyes narrowed as she bared her fangs and claws. Would you and my love rival be able to back them up? Not your love rival. Gray and Lucy groaned in annoyance at the daughter of Levia. Seriously, you would think after being told she would be going on an actual honest-to-dragon date with the man that she would stop seeing Lucy as her love rival. Well, as much as I like the level of friendly sportsmanship coming from you 4, I have to remind you that it won't be just you 4. Those words were the cue for the 3rd trial's next pair to arrive as loud screaming met their ears. E-M-A-A-D-I-I-T, Aya S-I-R. The fired Dragonslayer stampeded across the dirt, tears of relief streaming down his face as Happy flew alongside him. Gasping for breath with sweat lighting his brow, the son of Igniel collapsed into a heap on the ground and continued to cry. So many trees. Natsu howled as if in agony. So much, repeats. Ji-chan. Natsu crawled towards his guildmaster like a zombie who wished to feast on the brains on his target. Why was the first master so cruel so as to make that hellish illusion? Just when you think you make it past one part of the forest, the mist clouds your face and then you're fucking back, right where you started. Ah. The 80-year-old guildmaster could not help but snicker at the face of the mentally exhausted Natsu Dragneel and Happy. He patted the pyrokinetic mage on the head in same manner he would to all his children and waited for Natsu to stop blubbering and whining. Makarov raised a single eyebrow as Natsu's wails reduced to mere sniffles. You done? The dark-eyed Dragonslayer sighed, offering a small pout and a glare at the nonchalant manner in which his grandfather figure addressed him. Yeah. Good, then I can finally get started. Makarov grinned widely as he ushered Natsu and Happy to stand up beside their fellow trial candidates. As he did, he reached out and took the golden lacrimas from each of the 3 teams and assembled them in a triangular formation in front of Mavis's gravestone. As I told the others before you and Happy arrived, Natsu, congratulations are in order. You have done what only few in Fairy Tale have been able to accomplish, but unfortunately, only one of you will be able to graduate from merely being a candidate and actually hold the title of being an S-class mage of the guild. As he spoke, Natsu, Juvia and Happy ears and noses twitched as they felt a shift in the wind. The clear skies above them suddenly became a bit darker, swirling and coalescing into a massive cumulonimbus cloud. The winds howled and bolts of golden voltage forked across the heavens. the scent of ozone permeating the atmosphere. I'll be brief, and I am quite sure you are all very much anticipating to find out what the third trial is. To be honest, when I got this idea to have this placed as the third trial, Mira-chan, Urza and Gildarts were all a bit skeptical, but they all agreed to it in the end. Keeping it a secret from you all, especially you, Natsu, with your keen sense of hearing, was quite a challenge. Also, I had to pull a lot of strings and do a shit ton of paperwork, but I managed to slip this little surprise underneath all of your noses. What? Was the collective reply from the S-class candidates. Makarov chuckled as a roll of thunder met his ears, as if the very storm above him was annoyed with him. Ever the dramatic one you are. Fine, I'll move it along. Master, who are you talking to? Happy asked. Trial candidates Kana Alberon, Natsu Dragneel and Grey Fullbuster. Your final trial is a game to capture the pair of bells from your target. And as for who your target is.
It's me. The roar of thunder was accompanied by the flash of lightning. The bolt of golden voltage slammed down atop the grave of Mavis like the judgment of the Dragon King himself, and all 6 fairy tale mages were forced to shield their eyes for a brief moment. As the flash died down, they blinked rapidly to remove the spots from their eyes only to then become wide-eyed and slack-jawed.
No way. Kana stuttered. Master, punch me, I've got be dreaming. Grey exclaimed. Makarov laughed loudly at Grey's words, but merely patted the arm of the 19-year-old mage beside him.
It's the real deal here, my boy. It had been months, almost an entire year since the events that led to his excommunication.
He was a bit more muscular than before, and his complexion was a bit more tanned due to enduring months of traveling the continent, but he looked the same as he did since the day he had left. His clothing was a bit different, as he was wearing simple travel clothes, consisting of a large, hooded light cloak, a dark shirt under a long light jacket closed by a simple belt, loose dark pants ending below his knees, where each leg has a light band circling it, and boots reminiscent of his old greaves. He also has a small belt visible on his upper chest, crossing it horizontally. Huh. Looks like you finally made it this far. A wide grin stretched across the blonde mage's face as the bells tied to his belt jingled loudly in the wind. Had it easy so far. Now that I'm here, things are about to get a whole lot harder. I trust I can let you take things from here, my boy. Don't you know who you're talking to, Gigi? The lightning magic user cracked his knuckles and neck in anticipation. Just be prepared for the eventuality that you might not get an S-class mage from this set of trials. Makarov chuckled and once again patted his grandson on the arm. Take it away, Laxus. The moment Makarov left the area via teleportation magic, the S-class candidates were met with a massive force of magic energy that encompassed much of the surrounding area. For those that had the opportunity to ever face Gildarts on the field of battle, it was not as impressive or fear-instilling, but it still produced the same effect. The former second-generation Dragonslayer's eyes glowed with golden light and made a come-hither motion to the 3 pairs before him.
Well, you heard Gigi. Lightning sparked off of Laxus's body as he flexed his muscles in preparation for combat. Try to take these bells from my waist and just maybe you'll have what it takes to be an S-class. What do you say, Natsu? Usually you'd have already jumped at me already.
There was a brief silence as the son of Igneel stared into the eyes of his current opponent. Natsu's body trembled. His fists clenched tightly and a light chuckle escaped his lips. The trembling grew greater, not out of fear, but out of joy and anticipation. His chuckling escalated into full-blown laughter before he stamped his foot down in preparation, the ground cracking from the force. Insert music. Haikyuu: The Battle of Concepts. I just can't believe it, after so many months, after you got excommunicated. I really didn't think I'd ever get the chance to fight you again, let alone see you again, Laxus. A small frown adorned the electrokinetic mage's face. But you're back and I couldn't be happier or more excited. But don't get scared once you realize how much stronger I've gotten over the past few months since you've been gone. So, if it's a fight you want, Dreyar. Natsu slammed his fists together, orange-yellow flames bursting to life around them as his magic flared. Then it's a fight you've got.
Atta boy, Natsu. Laxus released a roar of anticipation. He looked out over the small band of the people he could once again call his guildmates. Now what about the rest of you? You think you have what it takes to take on the great Thunder Lord, Laxus-sama?
The excitement of the battlefield was enhanced as the combatants all grinned at one another as their magic energies flared, auras of varying colors forming a veritable rainbow before Laxus.
Grey conjured an ice sword, Juvia turned her hands into claws of hard water, Lucy summoned Virgo to her side while holding her magic bow staff at the ready, and Kana held her magic cards.
I'm all fired up. The catchphrase of the Fire Dragonslayer heralded the start of the battle, and true to their nature, Grey and Natsu wasted no time in delivering the initial attacks. Karyu no Kouen. Hyojin Maiku. Aim no Ya. A multitude of ebony magic circles dotted the air above Grey while burning orange ones sprung to life above Natsu. The magic seals all glowed to signify the activation of the spells, and soon a multitude of fireballs and black ice arrows were unleashed upon the formerly artificial Dragonslayer. Laxus's body was charged with magical lightning and he sped across the battleground, the arrows following but never once hitting him. Spikes of ice and small areas of burning earth marked the areas where the attempts to hit Laxus ended in failure, but he soon found that the numbers began to overwhelm him as an arrow grazed his shoulder and a fiery shockwave from a fireball caused a wave of heat to wash over the left side of his face. Laxus dug his feet into the ground and spun on his toes while calling upon his own magic. Golden yellow magic seals appeared, easily reaching 1,000. Lightning magic. 1,000 thunderbolts. The grandson of Fairy Tail's third master fired his own projectiles as a counter to Gray's and Natsu's onslaught, and the airspace of Mavis's graveside was dotted with explosions of ice, fire and lightning. The battlefield that had once been somewhat tame for a battle between Fairy Tail mages immediately turned into a war zone as the trio of elements arced through the air, leaving behind spikes of ice and small craters of scorched earth from redirected fireballs and lightning bolts. Karyu no Hoko. Natsu took a deep breath, magic and fire merging within his lungs before he unleashed a tongue of raging hot flame towards his opponent. Laxus backflipped, easily avoiding the attack before quickly generating an aura of voltage as Gray followed up by crafting a bow and arrow of black ice. Hyojin Maiku. Washi Shadow. The arrow split apart into 3 different projectiles almost immediately upon being fired. The arrows which made up the eagle shot spell then morphed into the likeliness of eagles, their glowing blue eyes zeroing in on their target as they flapped their raven-colored wings. One struck from above while the other 2 attacked from the left and right respectively. Lightning magic. Thunder shield. Laxus clapped his hands together and the aura of lightning that surrounded his body raced out like a shockwave. The avian projectiles released simultaneous screeches as millions of volts of electricity ripped through their very beings and shattered them like glass. Laxus continued to hop backwards a bit in order to gain some breathing room, but he was forced to skid to a halt as a trio of cards arced through the air, defying the very laws of aerodynamics. Card magic. Wind edge. The cards glowed with the magic of their user before releasing a powerful gust of slicing wind, but Laxus quickly hopped back to avoid the spell. Gonna have to do better than that, Kana. Tell that to Lucy. Having never really witnessed her in the field of combat, Laxus could not have been more caught off guard when the ground burst beneath him and a pink-haired maid emerged from its bowels. Laxus's eyes widened as he watched the approaching fingers of the spirit of the Virgin, but his reaction time had not dulled during his time as an inactive mage of Fairy Tail. Lightning magic. Lightning body. Laxus's physical form literally became that of a lightning bolt and he veered out of the way as the jingling of the bells around his waist alerted him to how close the former heiress had come to taking the bells. His somewhat solidified his body as he watched them from above, his eyes narrowing as they stared into the brown orbs of the celestial spirit mage as she was grabbed by her spirit and hurled towards him at a breakneck speed. A fist charged with lightning collided with a magically enhanced bow staff and a powerful shockwave raced across the stormy skies. The lightning mage raised his eyebrows, impressed with the power behind the girl's swing. "Looks like I underestimated you, rich kid. Please continue," Lucy replied as she and her fellow blonde's intense gazes clashed. "It makes it easier." "How so?" "Like this." A golden magic circle burst into form above Laxus. "Gate of the Lion. I open thee." Leo. The former second-generation Dragonslayer quickly overpowered Lucy's bow staff swing, sending her back towards the ground just as Loke fell from his opening in spacetime. Laxus caught the oncoming fist of light, a toothy grin stretching across his face as he looked upon his former guildmate. "Long time so see, Laxus. Shut the fuck up, womanizer, and join your master on the ground." Laxus slid his grip forward to latch onto the lion spirit's wrist before grabbing Loke's elbow with his free hand. With a roar, the lightning mage hurled Loke down to ground zero. Laxus's body exploded into its lightning form before he rocketed towards the lion spirit. Loke spun as he fell before crashing down, bending his knees to better absorb the shock of the landing, but the earth still cracked heavily beneath his shoes. The lion spirit's sixth sense spiky hair shifted as he felt the wave of static discharge being released from Laxus's body, and so he went into a back handspring. Lightning magic. Voltage hammer. The ground was encompassed in a column of lightning, Laxus's fist turning the earth into a smoldering crater. The resulting shockwave had Loke skidding backwards before he came to a halt beside his keys holder and Virgo. "As powerful as ever, Laxus. Flattery won't earn you victory against me, pretty boy." Laxus cracked his neck as he prepared to take on Loke, but just as he was about to charge towards his newfound target, his ears twitched as the sound of a battle cry echoed through the skies. Moving at near supersonic speeds, the blue exceed that was happy zipped towards Laxus with all the intent and purpose of grabbing the silver bells that would earn his partner victory in the S-Class trials. Laxus rotated his body and easily avoided the initial flyby, but his eyes widened when Happy turned on the dime and went into an upward arc before going into a vertical drop. Laxus unleashed a pulse of lightning, sending the exceed flying back, but the son of Igneal was quick to catch his best feline friend as he was rocketing through the air via his own method of flight. Karyu no Tekken. Natsu reared back his iron fist spell and sent it rocketing towards Laxus's face, but the young Dreyarch quickly bent his knees, avoided the swift blow. A gust of hot wind passed overhead, and Laxus felt as if the tips of his hair and the hair on the back of his neck had been singed. However, that did little to deter the former second-generation Dragonslayer from countering with a rising uppercut. Powering through his knees, Laxus sprung his body up to its full height and unleashed a sparking blow that collided with Natsu's chin. With a grunt of pain, the fire Dragonslayer tumbled through the air. "I'm not done yet, Laxus," Natsu roared as he righted himself in the air. "Fire in my right. Fire in my left. Karyu no Kouen." He clasped his hands together before swinging them down in a wide arc to unleash the blazing meteoroid that was the fire dragon's brilliant flame. The light shone as if it were that of a miniature sun, and Laxus was about to move to dodge, but he found that was not able to. Glancing at his body, his eyes narrowed in annoyance as he found his dominant right arm wrapped in a series of water whips while his feet were bound by ice. "Don't think the matchstick is the only one gunning for you," Gray announced as he took the stance of his trademark magic style. "Ice make. Snow tiger." The massive feline roared as it thundered out of its magic seal. "You guys really don't give a guy room to breathe, huh?" Laxus chuckled. "Good, don't give me a moment's rest. Give me a challenge." The sweltering heat from the fiery orb and the chilling cold from the charging snow tiger made it seem as if he was trapped between the sun and the chilling polar ends of the planet. But he had been caught in far more dire straits. He didn't become an S-class mage fighting weaklings every day. He took down orc hordes, felled wyvern nests, and even killed a demonoid, and this was all before mastering the lacrima he no longer had embedded in his magic circulatory system. Lightning magic. Jian. Laxus's eyes glowed with blue light and a storm of electric blue bolts were launched from his body. The force of the electromagnetic murder attack ripped apart his icy restraints, and the lightning began to conduct along the length of the water whips which Juvia used to bind him. "Gah!" The water dragonslayer cried out in agony as the electricity flooded her body. "Juvia! Worry about yourself before the girl." Gray. Laxus's body was wrapped in a cloak of lightning and his magic energy levels spiked as the lightning became focused in his hands, taking on the image of a mighty 20-foot-long hammer. Lightning magic. Mjolnir. With a roar, Laxus spun his body like a top and swung the mighty hammer that once existed in an age of gods. His hammer ripped through Natsu's fireball, reducing it to mere embers before going with the momentum to go into an upward swing that crashed into the underside of Gray's massive snow tiger. The icy creature roared as golden voltage lanced across and through its body before it shattered into numerous shards, a massive bolt rising heavenward through its stomach and out its back. "Loke, Kana," Lucy called to her spirit and her partner. "Right." The two nodded as they raised a glowing fist and magic cards respectively. "Light, sun, beast," Kana called out as the cards hovered in a triangular formation behind Loke. "Card magic, solar recharge." The light from the magic cards shone down on the spirit of Leo like a blessing from the heavens, and he was encompassed in an aura of golden light. His honey-colored eyes glowed with power as he tightened his already clenched fist before throwing forth the magic of the Holy Lion. Regulus impact. A powerful blast of light erupted from Loke's fist and carved a trench of now scorched earth upon the ground which it traversed. The beam morphed into the image of a roaring lion head, but Laxus was more than prepared for the augmented light magic spell as he raised his hammer high. The bolt which he had sent into the skies returned with a vengeance as Laxus swung the hammer down. Lightning magic. Stormbreaker. The bolt collided with the head of the hammer the moment said hammer slammed into the ground. A powerful streak of lightning tore across the battlefield, forming a trench of its own before it collided with Loke's spell. Lightning and light pushed against one another for dominance for what seemed like an eternity but was actually only a brief second. A powerful shockwave accompanied the explosion of lightning and light, a dome of brilliance tearing the ground apart before it died down to reveal a scorching crater. "Not bad tactics there, rich kid," Laxus commented, using the heap of spells from Natsu and Gray as a method of distraction to go for a killing blow. "But even I'm not so naive to think that you wouldn't use a double-layered trap." As the grandson of Makarov said this, Virgo exploded out of the bowels of the earth and once again aimed to steal the bells dangling from Laxus's hip. Laxus's hand struck out like a viper, grabbing Virgo before she had a chance to even touch the bells, but the monotone maid, for one of the few times in her entire life, showed some form of emotion with a mischievous smirk. "Leo." Laxus's eyes widened as a flash of light streaked across the land that made up of Mavis's gravesite. The lion spirit phased into existence out of the corner of Laxus's field of vision. The aura of the light of Regulus wrapped around him to grant him the enhanced speed he wished for. "We've got you. Like I said." Laxus's magic energy spiked. "I'm not so naive." With a boom akin to thunder, Laxus's body was suddenly enshrouded in magic energy and all eyes widened as Laxus seemed to undergo some sort of transformation. His body glowed golden like how it would whenever he would utilize the lightning body spell, But rather than becoming a bolt of living lightning, he retained his physical form. His musculature, having once been large and bulky like a bodybuilder, slimmed down noticeably and gave the lightning magic user a more lean and streamlined appearance, akin to a swimmer's form. His already spiky and unruly hair grew even more so, but eventually it became lengthier to the point that it billowed behind him like a tail. The golden glow increased in intensity until it became a blinding bluish white. Shit. Virgo. Get back. Insert music. Excel World Accelerated World. The spirits of the lion and the virgin immediately went to move away from the transformed Dreyar, but to Laxus, it was more akin to watching them move through molasses. From an outside perspective, it seemed as if Loke and Virgo had been sent careening through the air by an invisible force. But the truth was that Laxus's fists were simply much too fast for the inexperienced eye to keep track of. The two Celestials the battlefield, but managed to right themselves, digging their nails into the dirt and carving small trenches as friction brought them to a halt. Loke, Virgo. Lucy looked over her spirits, taking note of the electrical burns that now decorated their bodies. We are fine, Heim. Virgo stated. Blue eyes focused on Laxus, never once shifting from him, but in the one moment she chose to blink, he vanished from view. His body had only retained enough magic energy within him to put him at the level of a C-class mage at the very least when he lost the dragon Lacrima. That made the young man realize just how much of his magical prowess had been dependent upon the artificial power of a dragon. It was great and he easily became drunk on it, but during the past several months since his excommunication, he now had to teach himself how to truly master the element that was his lightning magic. He was beaten and broken many times, especially by that one mage who constantly felt the need to rap everything he said. However, his labors bore fruit and soon he managed to develop a technique that he could call his own. He absorbed and harnessed the power equivalent of 1,000 lightning arrows. The equivalent of the magic that had once been contained in the dragon Lacrima. To combat the power of high-level mages like Gildarts, to test his limits against those who wielded the magic of the dragons themselves. That was why Laxus created this very spell. He was still S-class and it was time he showed it. Loke's ears twitched and his mane of spiky hair bristled as he felt the shift in the atmosphere, above. Too late. Laxus materialized in a spark of blue lightning. His hands were already above the heads of the two spirits and so there was no time to react. Gravity felt as if it had increased tenfold for the two celestial spirits and the ground cratered slightly as they were slammed face first into the unforgiving earth. HRAH. A burst of lightning was unleashed from his glowing body and Loke and Virgo were sent into a series of convulsions as the electricity coursed through their nervous systems at such a rate that their brains never had the ability to make them scream in pain. Laxus released Virgo and Loke from his grasps and their bodies quickly dissipated into showers of golden light, returning to the spirit world for healing. What the hell? Kana uttered, her brown eyes wide and her legs trembling before the might of the S-class mage. Another spark of lightning marked Laxus's instantaneous movement. He no longer had to shift between physical and intangible when in this form, and with the literal speed of lightning on his side, there was no possible way for an everyday mage like Kana or Lucy to stop him. You made it pretty far. I was actually going to use this form against Natsu once he started getting serious, but you guys actually forced me to bring it out. Laxus patted the two shorter mages on their heads. But it's time you tap out. Small bursts of electricity ran through their bodies. Their eyes rolled up into their heads and that was the end for Kana and Lucy as they slumped down to the ground like puppets with their strings cut. Alright then, now that those guys are out of the way. Laxus's lightning aura sprung to life as his muscles tensed. Who wants to take a crack at me first? Juvia, Natsu and Gray were all still as they were the representations of awestruck, wide-eyed and slack-jawed. Laxus, you're strong, really strong, Natsu commented. Lightning magic. Thunder in heaven. I made this form to fight you, Natsu. To fight the Ogo no Fujin if I ever had the chance to meet him again. What? Natsu and Gray exclaimed. It may seem unrealistic, but I put myself through the most hellish training I could ever do and if I can handle a Dragonslayer of your caliber, then maybe. Just maybe I'm putting myself on the right track of being able to take that bastard down for tearing a hole in my stomach. Laxus opened out his undershirt to reveal the ugly area of scar tissue that covered his central abdomen. The other members of Fairy Tail winced. Poor Lyuzuka had done her best to heal him, but the damage was too extensive for a single doctor to perform. Though, to give her credit, the pink-haired woman had kept the young lad from dying so that was always a plus. What was a bit of scar tissue in the face of a near untimely demise?
And you really think Natsu is the measuring stick you need to use? Gray raised an eyebrow in confusion.
Oh, there are about 2 Dragonslayer I came across who make Natsu look like a hatchling compared to them. Oi. But I gotta start somewhere, but I'll be honest, Natsu and Red Fox, when they teamed up against me, they were doing a pretty damn good job of holding me back. Plus, I'm pretty confident you haven't been slacking off on the job either. The 2 young teenagers merely nodded their heads. Good. Now then, if we're done having our little heart-to-heart session, let's get back to fighting. Remember, you just had to grab these bells to become S-class, but if you want to try and knock me out, then you're going to find this trial a lot harder than it already is. We'll see about that. Gray snarled as he stamped his foot on the ground. Insert music. Fate, Stay Night UBW 2015 Unlimited Blade Works. Ice Make. Geyser, an ice blue magic seal appeared beneath Laxus's feet and in an instant, the man of lightning was completely encased in a spire of ice. However, the imprisonment was child's play for Laxus as the spire began to rumble heavily. A spiderweb of cracks spread across its surface before blasts of lightning reduced the geyser spell to mere fragments. That won't work on me. A spark of lightning and a boom of thunder heralded Laxus's shift into action. He reappeared before Gray and the Ice Godslayer's eyes widened as a mixture of blood and spittle escaped his mouth. The powerful punch dug into his belly before he was sent spiraling through the air only to be caught by the water Dragonslayer. Thanks, Juvia. Gray coughed as he fought to regain his breath. Don't think you'll get a chance to breathe, brats, Laxus roared as he launched himself through the air. He was gone the moment he said those words, but as Gray was glancing around in a panic, the senses of his Dragonslayer partner had already determined his location. With a snarl present on her face, the daughter of Leviat quickly pushed her beloved down and her hands became claws of solid water. Suiryu no Tsume. The water dragon's claws were swung and crashed against the downward chop that Laxus delivered upon reappearing. Juvia winced, gritting her teeth as she felt the electrical current being conducted by her watery weapons. So it seems that your Dragonslayer senses are still able to keep track of me, even when I'm moving at the speed of lightning. Laxus chuckled. Color me impressed, Loxer. Hyojin no Dougo. The bellow of the ice god raged forth from Gray's throat and Laxus's eyes widened as he was engulfed in an ebony ice storm that sent him tumbling through the air. He quickly regained his bearings in the air, shaking the ice crystals out of his bluish-white mane, but he sensed a shift in the stormy atmosphere he had created. The cumulonimbus clouds unleashed a torrential downpour and suddenly the raindrops began to move through the air as if they had a mind of their own. Suiryu no Dangan. True to its name, the water dragon's bullet's spell sent the multitude of raindrops rocketing towards Laxus equivalent to the speed of the sound. Unfortunately, lightning was far faster than sound and so Laxus easily maneuvered his way through the attacks and the sheer heat from the electrical discharge his magically enhanced body produced turned the few bullets that managed to approach him into steam. You will not escape Juvia's grasp that easily, the water Dragonslayer exclaimed. The waters bent to her will, and soon, massive tentacles of water snaked their way through the air after Laxus. The user of Thunder in Heaven performed a variety of aerial acrobatic appendages and soon turned his sights upon their user herself. Juvia's eyes widened and quickly forced the tendrils to move faster. A mental sigh of relief crossed her mind as she grabbed hold of the S-class mage's limbs, but Laxus merely chuckled and his body unleashed a burst of lightning. The water tentacles evaporated into steam and he surged forward upon being freed, his forearm slamming into Juvia's stomach with enough force to drive wind from her lungs. He quickly followed up with a strong kick that sent her careening through the air and slamming into the hard bark of a nearby tree with enough force to snap the towering piece of foliage in two. Juvia. Gray's eyes burned like hot coals before he swung a sword of black ice. Hyojin Meiku. Cold Excalibur. The massive broadsword was aimed for the neck, but Laxus batted the blade away with ease before swinging his arm down in a swiping motion. The heavens themselves obeyed and a bolt of blue lightning fell from above, but even though Gray was able to backflip out of the path of the electrical attack, the resulting shockwave had him rolling along the ground for a few moments. Aye sir, Happy swooped in to reach for the bells, but he was caught by his tail with ease. Really Natsu? The Thunder God looked at the salamander with a look that showed that he obviously felt insulted. He applied a small jolt to Happy and put the poor exceed out of commission with such ease it was downright laughable. Sending Happy to go for the bells? You know the cat can't do one shit against me. And yet you've nearly lost the bells twice because of him. Natsu countered as he sped across the battleground, fists ablaze. With about as much respect for an ant beneath his boot, Laxus dropped Happy in the mud as Natsu came in with a fire dragon's iron fist. Laxus sidestepped the swift 1-2 punch combo before hopping over the leg sweep. Natsu went with the momentum and maneuvered his body into a handstand. Karyu no Saiga. The crushing talon spell was delivered in the form of a whirlwind of kicks that Laxus backpedaled to avoid. As he was beginning to lose the momentum behind his rotation, Natsu bent his elbows and tumbled through the air. His arms were wrapped in flames that took on the image of dragon wings, and as he swung them, the fires changed from orange-yellow to bluish-white. Karyu no Yokugeki. Laxus gritted his teeth as he was sent skidding backwards from the explosive impact of the fire dragon's wing attack. Natsu then inhaled deeply as fire and magic combined within his lungs, but Laxus was quick on the draw and reared his fist back, bluish-white lightning sparking across his entire forearm. Karyu no Hoko. Lightning magic, crushing fist of majestic thunder. The torrent of blue and white fire burned a trench across the battlefield while a beam of concentrated lightning moved to collide with it. The two powerful spells clashed, fire and lightning pushing against one another for dominance. The elemental power struggle continued for a few mere seconds, but the magic energies destabilized before generating a massive explosion that had both combatants skidding away from each other. Juvia, now, yes, Gray-sama. Laxus's ears twitched and he saw Gray riding in on a pillar of water. Gray pushed off of the water pillar, increasing its speed, but Laxus evaporated the projectile with a burst of lightning before shifting his body and bending his arm to both block and divert the oncoming gauntlet of ice Gray had forged around his fist. With a quick shove, Laxus pushed aside the ice gauntlet before stabbing his hand forth in a knife hand strike aimed for the head. Gray tilted his head to the side, but the world suddenly blurred as Laxus immediately was capable of shifting his knife hand strike into a quick chop that slammed into the side of the ice make user's head. It looked like a mere tap, but Gray would beg to differ, and that the blow was akin to being hit with one of Makarov's titan fists as he was being sent hurtling into the face of a boulder, cracking it heavily as he lay within his imprint. "You think that a little surprise attack like that can get me?" Laxus clicked his tongue. "I expected more from you, Gray."
Remember what you said about double-layered traps. Gray wheezed as he coughed up a bit of blood. The lightning mage tilted his head in confusion, but then he found himself standing before an immense concentration of magical energy. He glanced out of the corner of his vision and his eyes widened for a brief moment as he caught sight of one of the most terrifying sights he had ever come across. Woda Doribu. With the phantasmal image of Levia roaring behind her, Juvia's scaled fist lashed out and dug into the older mage's cheek. He felt the bone creak and the world spin before he was sent careening through the air, smashing through a large boulder and over Mavis's headstone before coming to an abrupt halt as he smashed into the central trunk of the Tenro Island tree. With a groan, Laxus pulled himself free from the imprint his body had created from the impact. The coolness of the heavy rainfall brought about simply due to Juvia's presence helped rid him of the cobwebs in his head, but the blue-eyed lightning mage was suddenly met with the makeshift intensity of 10 suns as Natsu smashed down from above. Fei Adoribu. Karyu no Enchu. Bluish-white fire blazed forth from Natsu's elbow to produce an astounding amount of propulsion. The fire drive user's skin shone like rubies as the crimson scale-like marking reflected the light of the fires before he crashed his claws against Laxus's lightning body. Karyu no Soon. Laxus quickly vanished in a spark of lightning and reappeared to Natsu's left, but the older mage's eyes narrowed as Natsu hopped backwards and went into a series of backhand springs to avoid the follow-up lances of lightning that were being hurled his way. Natsu completed the acrobatic moves, the momentum causing him to skid backwards slightly before to cloak his hands in claws of flame as two beams of lightning hurtled towards him. The ground cracked heavily beneath his feet as he held back the attack only for his eyes to widen as Laxus flashed behind him and delivered a powerful chop to the back of his neck. Natsu slammed harshly into the unforgiving earth, but he had managed to catch himself with his hands, the land bubbling like lava due to the intense heat before he pushed himself back up and made a grab for the bells. Clever boy. Laxus chuckled. Laxus would have dodged, but both males were both caught off guard as Juvia emerged from a nearby puddle and grabbed Natsu's wrist with her own claws. Once she did, she offered an apologetic look to her fellow Dragonslayer. Sorry, Natsu-san. The water Dragonslayer herself made a grab for the bells, but her own wrist was entrapped by Laxus's iron grip. Keep your eye on the prize, Laxer. She released a cry of pain as lightning danced throughout her body before she and Natsu were carried skyward. The wind roared in their ears and Natsu's gums flapped as his mouth was open in surprise. Dark-colored orbs looked up at the thunder in heaven user and back down at the distant ground. Since when can you fly? Natsu exclaimed. Long before you could, Firebrand. Was Laxus's reply before he went into a vertical drop. A massive crater formed as the two drive mode users were slammed into the earth, but Laxus was relentless as he began to drag the two Dragonslayers across the battlefield, tearing large trenches with their bodies. If it weren't for their durability levels being so high, Natsu and Juvia would have probably not had faces they would be able to look at in the mirror given the amount of rock and dirt that would have practically sheared their skin away. Laxus came to an abrupt halt before spinning and hurling the two Dragonslayers away from him. Juvia slammed into a massive tree root while Natsu became very intimate with the face of a boulder. Don't forget me, Laxus. The thunder in heaven user's eyes widened as a flash of bright blue appeared beneath his CIER. A massive wall of ice was forged from the student of Ur's magic and as it grew taller, a coating of the magical substance climbed up Laxus's body and held him up to his neck. Gray. You bastard. You're playing dirty. Natsu growled before unleashing a roar as he ripped himself free from his rocky confines. Natsu inhaled deeply before concentrating the fires in his lungs with pinpoint precision. Karyu no Hausenka. The phoenix flower of the fire dragon was fired off and Gray's eyes widened as the high-speed spheroid of flame pierced through the area of the glacier just a few inches below his feet. What the hell, Matchstick? Gimme back Laxus so I can kick his ass. Another bullet of fire rocketed towards Gray, but this time the Ice Godslayer acted just in time to dodge it. He grabbed his ice-encased prisoner and ran along the length of his creation, chunks of ice scattering across Tenro Island as each fireball created an explosive impact. After firing off 10 phoenix flowers, Natsu's small amount of patience had already run its course and so he resorted to a bigger fire. Karyu no Hokoo. The tongue of fire raced towards the glacier like a wall of destruction, burning everything in its wake. The glacier's solid structure began to melt as the pure power of dragon fire ate away at its form. In a matter of seconds, the glacier was already reduced to a crumbling pile of crushed ice. Gray quickly held onto Laxus and used the trapped lightning user as a cushion for the fall. I hate you. Laxus growled from within his cocoon. Gray merely gave the older mage a sheepish grin, but both he and Laxus were quick to turn back in Natsu's direction as another tongue of whitish-blue dragon fire raged across the battlefield. It was then that Juvia appeared with her body in its liquid form to generate a protective wall that encircled her beloved and their target. Suiryu no Sujinheki. The water wall spell created a cloud of steam, but Natsu's legendary tenacity reared its head as he unleashed an extra burst of flame from his gaping maw. The bluish-white flames burned even brighter, turning a pale white that almost mimicked the ones he would use during Doragon Fosu. Juvia, for one of the first times in her life, actually began to sweat as the intense wave of heat washed over her. Gray-sama, I can't hold him back much longer. That's alright. Gray replied as he looked down at Laxus, observing the cracks in his ice prison. We're going to have to evacuate here for a moment anyway, but don't worry. I got a plan. You always do, Gray-sama. A plan, huh? Laxus snorted before unleashing a burst of lightning. Let's see how your little plan is going to help you fight me off. I know that flame brain well enough to know that I don't have to be the one to fight you off. Juvia, out of the way. The student of the ice goddess ran towards his trial partner and scooped her up in his arms. Had it been in any other situation, Juvia would be beside herself in ecstasy from being held in a princess carry by her chosen mate, but her feeling of happiness was easily distracted by the roaring comet that was Natsu as he literally charged through the remnants of her water wall spell. Karyu no Kenkaku. The fire dragon's sword horn collided head-on with Laxus and both males carved a trail of destruction through the upper levels of Tenro Island's forest. Insert music. Fate Stay Night UBW 2015 Excalibur.
I'm gonna kick your ass, Laxus. Natsu roared. S-class or not, today's finally gonna be the day I turn your ass into ash.
Big words from the little salamander. Laxus laughed. Then come at me, Natsu. Show me what you got.
Fists and feet collided. Shockwaves then echoed across the forests as the two mages of Fairy Tail clashed with one another. Bluish-white fire and similarly colored lightning tore the lands asunder. Flora and fauna alike suffering the aftereffects of the seemingly cataclysmic collision between the might of a fire dragon and a makeshift thunder god. Why? The thoughts of both combatants were identical as they continued to try to turn each other into a bloody mess. But Laxus's body being akin to lightning almost made him somewhat intangible and Natsu's dragon-like durability was tough to crack. As the battle raged on, bits of blood began to dot the battlefield, but the cries of annoyance and battle lust continued to echo across Tenro Island. Why? They thought. Why won't you just fall? I'm finishing this. Natsu roared as his magic energy flared like a raging inferno. Bring it, brat. Laxus challenged as a storm of electricity sparked from his body and forged it into the likeliness of a might halberd. Metsuryu Ougi. Guren. Bakuenjin, lightning magic, heavenward halberd. The two mighty spells were prepared to be unleashed, the battle about to end between what had been decided to be the final blows from the two titans of Fairy Tail. Time seemed to slow down for them as they neared each other, whips of explosive flame nearing the construct of concentrated lightning. Now Juvia. Yes, Gray-sama. Huh. Both Laxus and Natsu glanced to the side and their ears twitched as they caught wind of the sound of jingling. Their vision swam as they were encased in the orbs of water that made up Juvia's water prison spell. They barely lasted for even 5 seconds as the immense heat generated by their bodies was enough to evaporate the liquid prisons, but those few seconds was all Gray needed to launch a small falcon made of ice at Laxus. With its natural speed and great visual acuity, the falcon was one of the most astute avian hunters in the natural world and thus its accuracy was near 100% as it swooped in and snatched the pair of bells off of Laxus's person. The adrenaline rush that came with their fight was quick to die down as Laxus and Natsu glanced between each other, the bells and the culprits. You just. What the? Laxus spluttered and stammered as his thunder in heaven form died away and he returned to his base form just as Natsu did the same, allowing drive mode to dissipate. You cheated, Natsu exclaimed. I was about to beat Laxus into the ground and take the bells and win. You knew I was gonna do it and so you pulled a sneaky trick, Gray. Where's your sense of fair play? This is fair play, matchstick. Gray smirked as he tossed the bells up and down casually. Bullshit. Don't be even more of idiot than you already are, Natsu. I got the bells fair and square. I just happened to use a more Crafty method. Juvia giggled as she was offered a high five from the cryokinetic mage. He's right, you know. The four mages all turned to the side as Makarov appeared in a flash of golden light via teleportation magic.
Gigi. Ji-chan. Laxus and Natsu were still in disbelief as the diminutive guildmaster made his way towards Gray and Juvia, offering them bright smiles. I always had a feeling that it would come down to you and Natsu as to who in your generation would be ready for S-class, but the only way I could know for sure was if you both partook in the trials themselves. It could have gone either way, to be honest.
So you mean I could have beaten Laxus? Natsu asked. No way in hell. Your Thunder in Heaven spell is quite an amazing one, unique in many ways as it is basically the concentrated power of your 1000 Thunderbolt spell focused within your magic circulatory system. However, you have yet to truly master it since you cause disruptions in the very atmosphere itself. A Dragonslayer's senses are very much in tune to the world around them, and that is why despite the fact that you can move at the speed of lightning, Natsu and Juvia are able to sense you and either choose to avoid you or mount a counterattack. Also, it uses a great deal of magical energy, no doubt, and I could feel your magic dropping at a substantial rate throughout the fight. Natsu would have won that final clash, and that is a fact. Ha ha. In your face. I'm stronger than you. Natsu laughed victoriously. And yet you're not the one who got the bells, dumbassin from Natsu's sales with that one sentence, but that made the gears in Natsu's head turn a bit as he looked to his rival. So, how do you know to get to the bells at that point? I knew when to go in for the bells a few minutes into the fight. Gray replied. Lucy and Kana are good mages, but we both know that Laxus was the second strongest mage in the guild next to Guildarts. Gotta admit that Lucy's plan was very crafty, but Laxus didn't become an S-class on brute strength alone. Once they were taken out, it was basically down to you and Happy. Happy is. Well, he's happy. You dug yourself a bit into a hole by picking Happy as your partner since he can't do much in actual combat like Juvia can. Damn it, Kana. Natsu cursed the daughter of Guildarts as he recalled her taking Lucy just as he was about to ask her in the beginning. Yeah, Gray chuckled as recalled that moment as well. You were basically on your own from the get-go, but for this fight. Gray paused as he pondered his words. Sure, Juvia and I would do our utmost to fight and get the bells from Laxus, but it's in your nature to be a frontliner. You were going to charge in headfirst and duke it out with Laxus, and well, you're one hell of a fighter, no doubt about it. It's why I see you as my rival. You would wear down Laxus pretty well, and once you did, I knew that you would both go for a decisive clash to determine who would win between the two of you. It was because I knew you two well enough in that regard that Juvia and I were able to strike when we did and take the bells. Makarov nodded his head in satisfaction while Laxus scratched the back of his head, a look of annoyance of his face. You used me, played me like a damn fiddle, Natsu scowled. These trials are a test of the mind and power, Flamebrain. Gotta use both if you want to make it as S-class, remember. Gray reminded his rival. That only caused the scowl on Natsu's face to deepen. The pink-haired Dragonslayer looked down as Makarov patted him on the thigh. You have done an admirable job befitting of an S-class candidate, Natsu, but while victory is the ideal outcome, you must also be willing to accept failure. That is also part of the mentality of what it takes to be an S-class. The Fire Dragonslayer's scowl softened as he looked at his grandfather figure. There was only truth in the old guildmaster's words, and so the son of Igniel sighed before walking over the student of Shiva. He raised a fist and offered his best friend and rival a nod of acceptance. Don't think that means you're stronger than me. Natsu stated, all it means is just you have one more point. Just gotta equalize the score. Gray chuckled and reciprocated the fist bump, like hell you will. The third master of fairy tale smiled at his surrogate children. Natsu had certainly matured as a mage and as a person, but it just was not his time. Not yet, that is. On that though, Makarov then turned his head to the Ice Godslayer and tapped the dirt with his staff. The other mages of fairy tale stood up a bit straighter as they could feel the authority within those simple taps. Gray. The elder Drayar motioned for the young man to kneel, and kneel he did. You showed luck when passing through the first trial, having found the passageway where you found no conflict. You showed you possessed a great mind as you bypassed the sacred grove. You showed the capability of not just working on your own, but also working with your partner in a manner that would bring you victory, something which has aided in your success to retrieve the bells from Laxus. Acting in tandem, you have shown that you possess the qualities befitting an S-class mage of fairy tale. Makarov raised his staff and rested it down on the student of the ice goddess's left shoulder before doing the same on his right. Gray Fullbuster. Student of Ice Godslayer, Frost Knight, Makarov announced. Stripper. Popsicle. Snowflake. Natsu interjected. A glare from Makarov, Juvia and Laxus made him raise his hands in surrender. Clearly now was not the time for playing jokes. Your skills have earned you many titles, but today you will have another to add to your list of monikers. Today, by the power vested in me as the third master of fairy tale and with Mavis Vermilion as witness, I name you an S-class mage of fairy tale, airship courtiers, Grimoire Heart Flagship, Skies of Fury. The sounds of Ultir's footsteps echoed throughout the corridors of the airship, her mind running through the battle plan that she was to be in charge of. The weight of her guild master's words made her shoulders feel as if they were sagging, and she couldn't help but sigh as she caressed the ring construct she had forged around her ring finger. Despite having only created the ice ring to fool that flirtatious hotel concierge into thinking Naruto was her husband, she never did remove it. Hades, Blue Note and the Kin of Purgatory, signs Shukaku, all waved it off as just an accessory, so they never questioned her about it. However, for some reason, wearing the piece of icy jewelry brought some form of calm to her. You still have it on, I see. Shukaku's voice snapped Ultir out of her thoughts, her dark eyes meeting his golden ones. What the? Ultir felt as if her soul had left her body before she glared at the laughing Biju Exceed. What are you even doing out here? Master Hades called all of us executive members to go and meet him in the war room. I had some stuff to do. Ultir arched an eyebrow as she looked behind Shukaku as the room door closed behind him with snap hiss. Stuff to do? In the engineering room? I'll have you know I'm an expert in magical technology. In your dreams maybe. Exactly. Ultir snorted at the Tanuki-esque feline's reply. You're incorrigible. And you're very much a bitch. The two sneered at one another as they made their way through the airship's corridors to head for the war room, choosing to move together for pure convenience as Sasuke. Taking advantage of their lack of communication, Shukaku reached out with a mental link to his eldest sibling. Hey, asshole? You there? I may be an asshole, but you're still an idiot for making yourself telepathically whisper. No one can hear you think, dumbass. I hate you. Shukaku practically felt the eye roll from his old brother. Anyway, just giving you an update. Gaara and I infiltrated the engineering room, but we got a call for the executives to meet up with Hades in the war room. I left Gaara behind to interrogate the staff to see what exactly it is about these weird attachment parts on the airships that has you all so stressed out. Will the staff pose a problem post-interrogation? Well, Shukaku's eyes narrowed in thought. Given that Gaara is Gaara, it won't be much of an interrogation as much as it will be Gaara asking them questions. The engineers being scared to tick him off since everyone is aware of his kill streak, and then him getting the answers. We'll probably be able to send you some data files too, so be on the lookout for those. Good work, Shukaku. I don't need your praise, Baka Kitsune. The mental link was severed at that point, and the youngest of the nine immediately glanced in Ultir's direction. The hallways were still quiet aside from the human mage's footsteps, something which Shukaku found rather odd considering how talkative the Arc of Time user was whenever they were together. Granted, most of their dialogue consisted of mostly insults, but talking was still talking. It was then that he saw the reason for the younger Milkovich twins' silence. Insert music. Kimetsu no Yaiba Nezuko. Why do you even still have that on? Shukaku asked as Ultir continued to fiddle with the ring of ice. You made it so you could easily deconstruct it without a second thought. No reason. The pause in her response had the Ichibi scowl and annoyance. Bullshit. If I didn't know any better, I'd say you liked the idea of being married to the brat. Shukaku's scowl morphed into a mischievous smirk. Maybe a bit of teasing would ease the answer out of the Dark Guild's second-in-command. That kiss he gave you left that much of an impression on you, huh? No, Ultir blushed, her mind suddenly flashing back to the moment the Golden Wind God had kissed her. It's not that at all. She says as she blushes like a schoolgirl. Shukaku laughed, but the laughter quickly died down as he took note of the troubled look on Grimoire Heart's second-in-command. Alright. I'll bite. Clearly whatever's on your mind has something to do with the ring. Ah, Shukaku-kun, do you actually care about little Omi? Don't flatter yourself, woman. The Ichibi rolled his eyes. Now talk. The great Shukaku-sama is willing to lend an ear for this one time only. Great Shukaku-sama my ass. The 19-year-old mage scoffed as she continued to rub the ring of ice on her finger. It's less about the ring and more about what Fujin-kun gave me before I left. The ring I keep on me just to remind me of what transpired since I can't exactly go whipping this thing out all the time. Her mind took her back to the moment before she and Naruto parted ways, him granting her freedom from being a hostage before he would go off to do battle against his mind-controlled best friend. Reaching into her pocket, the Arc of Time user withdrew a folded-up piece of paper with a dark purple magic seal, the kanji for communication, casting a soft glow on both her face and Shukaku's. That's a communication seal, yes, it is. Ultir nodded in confirmation. Before I left to return to Grimoire Heart, before you all went off to fight Kurama. Fujin-kun gave me this. It sounded less like a threat and more like a promise that he would take down Grimoire Heart and that in the aftermath of it all, I would join him. Sounds like Naruto. The sand magic using Exceed nodded. He shifted his gaze from the seal to the young woman before him. So you're wondering about the outcome of this whole plot of Master Hades and if you're actually going to consider joining up with Naruto? Is that it? Well, I doubt I'd even be given a choice. You'd be surprised, the Ichibi thought. From what Kurama would say when talking about the Apocalypse Dragonslayer. Naruto had really come a long when it came to toning down his my way or die methods. But, I'll be honest, the dark-haired woman chuckled. I'm not completely opposed to the idea of standing with him. Why's that? A moment of pause passed between the two as Ultir searched for her words, the two kin of purgatory continuing to traverse the corridors of the airship. It's just. Ultir exhaled forcefully. I've never really had options before. Okawa-san sent me to the Bureau of Magical Development when I was just a baby. When the bureau was destroyed, Master Hades found me. I'm indebted to Master Hades not just for saving my life, but for nurturing me. I don't really have a choice if I wanted to run out on the guild. You're making an excuse for yourself there, Ultir, the golden-eyed Exceed stated. Ultir flinched slightly at the truthful jab. Perhito Gaybalg was an evil man. He looked at the world with an intense focus, removing any and all obstacles in his way while utilizing any and all resources he had. She was one of those resources after all. She knew she was being used. One does not simply teach a 14-year-old girl how to control time with magic on a mere whim. But blind love and faith in the man who made her who she was prevented her from acting on what that little voice in the back of her mind was telling her. It told her to run, to never look back, to live her life on her own terms rather than those of a dark mage with grandiose plans of world reform. She always had a choice, but she was a naive child in the end. A naive child who clung to the leg of her parent, and if she let go, she would not be able to live with the guilt. You don't need to feel guilty if you left, you know, Shukaku said. And yet I do. It is a level of guilt that is difficult to bear. The daughter of Ur sighed. If I could leave Grimoire Heart right now, there's the very real possibility that I actually have another route to choose aside from just becoming a wandering mage, but… Well, if you want to bust out of here, one word to Matabi and we can break out of here without breaking a sweat. Ultir arched an Ibu recruited Gaara and I on Matabi's recommendation to replace Azuma and Zankro after Naruto and Kurama killed them, but that's as far as our relationship with this dark guild goes. I have no ties to this place and I'd turn it into smoldering wreckage without even looking back. The Tanuki spoke without a pause, showing just how serious he was towards the matter. Matabi cares about you and if I told her you wanted out, she'd be over the moon and end up roping me into the mix when she comes for you. You say that with such conviction. Shukaku shrugged. She may be a giant two-tailed firecat who is a bona fide pain in my ass, but she's still my sister. Insert music. Kimetsu no Yaiba voices of the past. Command Center FMS Terumi, Fiorian C. Lahar drummed his fingers against the regimental badge that had been stitched onto his uniform, the badge that officially marked him as Grand General of Fiore's entire branch of the Rune Knight Corps. His dark green eyes were fixated on the horizon, staring with an almost uncomfortable level of intensity from his chair within the Terumi's superstructure. The sound of metal shifting and footsteps falling alerted him to the approaching form of one of the Terumi's crew, and a hefty shoulder pad informed him of who it was without him having to even turn away from the horizon. Brosnan, have you briefed Fairy Tail on the current situation? Yup. The amber-colored eyes of Lieutenant General Alice Brosnan shifted from the horizon to that of the Grand General. They're on standby.
You got all the details across without trouble. Lahar arched a dark eyebrow, respect and surprise present in his tone. However, the snort of amusement that came from the Lieutenant General immediately informed him of the contrary. Since Makarov-sama and Urza-sama knew the details of the mission already, it wasn't that hard to tell him about the mission, but… Alice sighed and shrugged her shoulders. Most of them got the gist after the first run-through, but Salamander and Fullbuster took a bit of reiteration. They're kids. The Grand General stated. Dumb ones at that. Alice chuckled. They're a fun group, but I'll never know why you volunteer for the missions when we have to bring them in for their monthly court sessions.
Lahar smirked. You get used to them. That's right. Alice poked his cheek playfully. You get used to them, while his lower-ranked drivel had to handle the real work. The Grand General of Fury swatted away the offending index finger of his former barrack mate and the armor-clad woman could only laugh in response. There was a pregnant pause between the two and Alice took note of the way her friend's shoulders seemed to be slumped slightly, as if they were bearing an immense weight. You okay, Grand General Lahar? The bespectacled Rune Knight's gaze shifted away from the horizon with a confused expression. You of all people know you don't have to refer to me by my title, Alice. Then talk to me, Ethical Kun. Alice, referring to him by nickname, despite it being annoying since their days in the barracks, was actually quite comforting in this situation. It was endearing, a jab towards his lifestyle of following rules and regulations, but endearing nonetheless. She rested a comforting hand on her former barrack mate's shoulder. We've seen a ton of battlefronts before. What makes this one any different that you are starting to feel so nervous? Everything, Alice. He gritted his teeth and the drumming of his fingers increased in tempo. I was a simple captain not too long ago. Head Captain Han left and I was put in charge and now I quite literally hold everybody's lives in my allegedly capable hands. Hyberian Sama's words, not mine. Well, he's right. Alice shrugged, her silver armor clinking slightly at the movement. The pressure on you is something I can't really comfort you about. You, comfort? Shut up, ethical coon. The light magic user punched the Grand General of Fury in a not-so-light manner. As I was saying, the only thing I can do is remind you how you once dreamed of being in a high-ranking position. You knew that there wouldn't be any sort of easy road to attain that. You knew the risks that came with any sort of position of power better than anyone in our generation of rune knights, so don't start second-guessing yourself now, because that's only gonna make things worse. The enemy doesn't care about your feelings. Lahar muttered more to himself than to his fellow rune knight. Head Captain Han literally beat that into us. Yup. Alice chuckled. I can still remember your high-pitched screams. You might be mistaking mine for yours. Oh please. Alice rolled her eyes as she jabbed a finger against the green-haired man's chest. I recall that our esteemed Grand General here actually crying for his mommy. Coming from the rune knight who tried to use her gender as a way to try and get the head captain to go easy on her. It could have worked. If he was into women who were less than half his age and flat as cardboard. I was 18, asshole, the Lieutenant General snapped. Lots of girls don't get their growth spurts even by then. Excuses. Lahar snorted. The fact that you still refer to your hitting puberty as a growth spurt is still hilarious, by the way. Ethical coon, you asking for a can of whoop ass?
The two rune knights would have continued their playful banter, something that served to ease the minds of the stressed crew of the command center considerably. Seeing two of their superior officers joking around in a highly stressful situation did wonders for them, but unfortunately all good things had to come to an end as the sound of the Terumi's radar system activating echoed throughout the command center.
What the fuck? What do you see, Tyson? Alice and Lahar asked the older rune knight. Years of dedicated service earned the burst magic using veteran sniper the right to no longer wear the standard armored helmet, and instead swapped it out for the more comfortable cap from his former occupation as a magic four-wheel delivery driver. Major General Tyson Hammer adjusted said cap as he always did when he was nervous. We got 5 unidentified bogies coming from the east, Tyson informed his superiors. Think that's them? Can only be. The Lieutenant General replied as her amber eyes seemed to glow. What's the word, Lahar?
The bespectacled Grand General didn't reply as he activated the communication lockrima that was on his workstation. Attention, all ships. This is Grand General Lahar. The urgency in his voice forced everyone around him to prepare for battle. 5 airships have been picked up on the Terumi's radar. Have all warships adjust the angles of the anti-aircraft cannons to allow for maximum firing distance, and prepare all defenses. Insert music. Fairy Tale Guild Darkness. War Room Grimoire Heart Airship, Skies of Fury. Fully clothed and at a level of strength that was beyond that of when he was in his prime, Purhito Gaybold sat at the head of the table that made up the airship's war room. A map of the continent was laid out before him, his eyes narrowed in thought as he observed the chess pieces that were to represent his own forces and those of his opponents. Meredy, Caprico and Blue Note all stood around the table in silence as their leader hummed in thought, but the humming was brought to brief pause as the demon bloodholder heard the doors to the war room sliding open. I would have expected such tardiness from Shukaku, but not you, Ultir. Shukaku merely shrugged in response. I apologize, Master. Ultir bowed her head. I have no excuse. The former Master of Fairy Tale did not respond to her, but instead turned to his guild's Edelysian resident.
Where is Gara? The Centennial asked, taking note of the lack of the red-haired man that usually accompanied the sand magic user. Golden eyes glanced in the direction of where his shared living quarters with Gara were located. You know how he gets when a mission involving battle comes up. Hulking to like the child he is, but I had to tie him down a bit so he wouldn't let that bloodlust of his get out of hand.
Hades's demonic eyes glowed to reflect his annoyance, but decided that it was not worth the time nor effort to quarrel with the Ikibi when he would no doubt be ignored. Taking a calming breath, the Master of Grimoire Heart turned his attention to his second-in-command. What is our status, Caprico? We are moments away from arriving within Tenro Island's airspace, Master. Caprico stated as he gestured to the 5 black chess pieces which were positioned over the Furian Sea. Gem and Mini have maintained their cover aboard the Terumi, but recent reports have shown there to be no changes in the Magic Council's defensive plans against our oncoming attack.
So they know that we're still coming. Meredy turned to her master. Are we not going to act on that knowledge? There is no need to worry, my dear, the Dark Guild Master offered a reassuring smile to the pink-haired child. While we no longer bear the element of surprise, we still possess a greater hand in the form of our superior firepower.
5 Jupiter cannons is indeed quite terrifying show of power, Master, I agree to that. Meredy gestured to the chess pieces representing the Furian Navy fleet surrounding Tenro. However, I still do not know what exactly is the plan to make up for us no longer being able to mount a surprise attack. Gotta side with the brat on this one, boss. Blue Note jumped in as he looked the map over with a lazy-eyed expression. We can probably still send the armada flying, but they could probably have some defensive magic shield and whatnot set up to block our assault. That is true. Hades nodded in confirmation. But the element of surprise is also lost on our opponents. We know their numbers and their positions. We also know their plan of attack due to Gem and Mini. You are very kind to provide my kin with such high praise, master. Caprico gave the rejuvenated centennial a small bow of appreciation. Whether they are your kin or not, Caprico, the fact is that Gem and Minnie have done quite a stellar job at infiltrating and monitoring the situation within the FMS. Terumi. If I had been aware that celestial spirits had such versatile applications in these fields, I would have ordered an attack on Oracion to procure Angel's golden keys for the guild. Having Merity retrieve the golden keys from her body after the Nirvana debacle is proving to have been quite a well-played move.
Speaking of the infiltration onto the Terumi, Caprico, Ultir arched a violet-black eyebrow. You're sure nobody has found the Rune Knight's body? Mest Grider has been effectively dealt with. The celestial spirit tone was resolute.
Isn't that guy like a super spy for the Rune Knights? Shukaku asked. Why'd you pick that guy out of all the Rune Knights to be the one to take out? Mest was actually playing quite a profound role for the Magic Council. The spirit of the goat replied to the Tanuki-esque exceed. As you correctly stated, he is a very prominent figure in the field of assassination and espionage for the Rune Knight Corp, and for the Magic Council as a whole. With that in mind, he would be privy to great deals of information, including being one of the first members to be made aware of any notable changes in the Corp's strategies when we arrive. Fair enough, but like I said, he's a super spy. The Aikibi gained a perplexed expression. How'd you even get rid of him? Gem and Minnie masqueraded as a common Rune Knight and proceeded to isolate Mest in his quarters. Caprico informed the youngest of the 9. A mere snap of the neck and throwing the body through the room's porthole made for an effective method of disposal. Also, Gem and Minnie are capable of transforming into carbon copies of their targets down to their magical energy signatures, so the likelihood of them being caught is near zero. All that cloak and dagger stuff is so boring. I would have just sent the man flying. Blue Note chuckled as an aura of magic energy outlined his clenched fist. Even if it wouldn't have been a surprise attack, I'm sure that would have ended up being quite a surprise for the Magic Council. Your straightforward attack methods would have dealt quite a blow to the Magic Council's forces, I concur. Blue Note smiled at the praise. But I required a scalpel, not a sledgehammer.
The smile from the Ace of Grimoire heart fell almost immediately. Oh.
Master. Merity raised her hand like a student in a classroom before dropping it as Hades gave her a nod of acknowledgement. So just to clarify, our plan is to simply overwhelm the Rune Knights with sheer force of might. Not entirely, my child. The Demon Blood Holder replied. Yes, we do possess significant firepower to overwhelm our opponents, but the Rune Knights also have taken counsel from the 10 Wizard Saints. Makarov would no doubt have had a part to play in their tactics, and I know that boy inside and out. He will want to attempt to halt all conflict from the get-go with an attempt to intimidate us with the full transformation of his Titan magic, followed by the threat of fairy law. Fairy law, Ultir exclaimed. But that is allegedly Fairy Tail's trump card. Why would they use such a powerful spell at the start? As I said, Ultir. Hades chuckled as he steepled his hands in front of his face. He will want to halt all conflict, and with a spell Master Mavis developed as the ultimate deterrent, a spell that effectively drains all magic and the literal will to fight from its targets, it is quite a fearsome thing. However, as a former master of Fairy Tail, I am also aware of the spell's weakness. And what would that be? Shukaku asked. That, Shukaku, is the fact that fairy law is a deterrent and thus must be countered with another of its kind. A deterrent to battle itself must be met with a counteracting force, a sense of maleficence.
The law of opposites. Ultir's eyes widened in surprise. So even fairy law can succumb to the universal concept of an opposite. Precisely, Ultir. Hades nodded in confirmation. The law of opposites is what led to the creation of many things. Light and darkness. Holy and demonic. Earthland and Edelas. The universe itself runs on such a property to achieve a sense of balance, and so I utilized the foundation that if Mavis Vermilion could create such a powerful magic to end a battle, then it would stand to reason that a counter to it can exist. And you've done it? The sand-colored Exceed's eyes widened slightly. You have developed the ability to fight off fairy law? It took many years inclusive of the time prior to when I founded Grimoire Heart, but I managed to crack the code that was Fairy Tail's ultimate spell. The master of Grimoire Heart did not withhold the bit of pride he felt at his accomplishment. The only thing left is to search the island for Zeref's exact.
Speaking of which, how are we going to find the Black Mage? Blue Note asked. Never really got how we suddenly knew that he was Tenro. That, my boy, is because of the link I began to develop from introducing the demon blood into my system. Hades' crimson eye shone as if to emphasize the point. The demon heart was a relic from the war that took place 400 years ago, a biomechanical marvel crafted by the descendant of Merlin. After I began transfusing the demon blood into my system, I developed a link between myself, the keys that we collected, and Zeref himself.
So you were able to trace his magical energy signature then? Merity asked. Bright girl. Hades praised the pink-haired kin of purgatory. You're correct, Merity. It took some time while I was still in the transfusion tank, but I was able to do it. The one magic is within our grasp then? Ultir asked. Indeed, my child. The bearded dark mage nodded.
The one magic is practically ours, but I need not remind you just how much our strategy hinges upon your arc of time. Ultir, our ability to make it past the navy blockage hinges on your rewear off by even 1 second. Our ace in the hole that will allow us to hold off Makarov's full Titan form will be lost. I am aware of what our airships are, Master. The purple black-haired mage bowed her head slightly. I will not fail you.
Of course not, and I do not expect failure from any of you either. The demonic bloodholder directed a venomous tone to the other kin of Purgatory and Blue Note. Yes, Master. A knock on the door of the war room brought a brief pause in the meeting followed by the activation of the opening mechanisms.
Master Hades. The grunt stammered slightly upon realizing all eyes were on her. I apologize for the intrusion, Master, but I just came to inform you that we are now within Tenro Island's airspace. Battle preparations are already underway. Good. Hades shifted his gaze to his second in command. Ultir, come with me. The rest of you, you know your orders. Commander Center FKS Terumi, Fiorine Sea. The sounds of the naval vessels getting into position echoed across the Fiorine Sea as Lahar looked out over to the horizon from the main window of the Terumi's superstructure. The 5 tiny dots in the distance were steadily growing larger and Lahar turned to the trucker hat-wearing navigator. Major General Tyson, what's the current distance between ourselves and those airships? Current distance is 35 kilometers, sir. The navigator replied as he looked down at the radar. Brosnan. Alice stood a bit straighter as she realized the dark green-eyed man was no longer kidding around. Him referring to her by her last name was an indication of that. What is the maximum firing distance of our ships? 36, sir. Take the initiative. Lahar's words were firm as he once again activated the communication lacrima. All ships, fire. Insert music. 2 steps from Hell White Witch. Balcony Grimoire Heart Airship. The wind made their hair whip wildly and the lack of wind resistance made Ultir feel rather chilly, her jaw shaking slightly as she withheld the physiological response to shiver. Her dark eyes looked straight ahead as she stood beside her guild master, the numerous black dots that were representative of the Fiorine naval force ready to welcome them. Get ready, Ultir. Yes, master. The daughter of Ur held out her hand, violet magic energy outlining her body. The wind continued to howl, but it carried the voices of the 55 battleships with it. The whines and roars of the anti-aircraft weaponry echoed across Tenro Island's airspace, smoke rose from the mouths of the cannons and the numerous muzzle flashes dotted the seascape like a line of starlight before they were replaced with the high-speed projectiles that aimed to remove Grimoire Heart from its place amongst the clouds. Bright blue energy beams and massive cannon shells rocketed towards them, marking the first wave of attacks. They struck home, piercing the thick armor plating and destroying much explosive material. Clouds of smoke and tongues of fire prepared to generate an explosive chain reaction that would result in all 5 airships being brought to a fiery doom and a swift victory for the Magic Council, but the younger Milkovich twin saw the entire chain of events as a mere annoyance. Rewind. From their positions on the water, the Rune Knights of Fury could only watch in both awe and frustration as a bright pulse of purple magic energy exploded from the frontal airship. It took them mere seconds to have finished firing the first wave and watch their enemies begin to go down in flames, but within that same amount of time, they watched the airships appear to heal themselves. Shards of steel and shrapnel fell perfectly back into place, fire and smoke vanished as if they had never even happened, and then they were all staring at a hovering line of their own weaponry. The energy beams, now spheroids of concentrated energy, were splayed out like a deck of cards alongside the cannon shells.
Don't let up, Lahar exclaimed through the communication lacrima. It's just Ultir's Arc of Time magic. We know she's powerful, but we've been up against powerful foes before. This is a battle, so there is no time to falter. Not for long at least. You're to treat this fight like any other. Even if it was against one of the strongest dark guilds, the Rune Knights are to do what we do best. Protect and serve for the sake of the Kindgom and its people. The soldiers across the ships felt their spirits heighten from the determined words of their Grand General. So don't let up, fire the second wave. The sounds of the second wave met her ears and Ultir looked on with a bit of surprise at how quickly the Rune Knights were unleashing their next attack. With a scowl, Ultir snapped her fingers and the rewind spell once again activated for the paused barrage of weaponry. The rewound projectiles were turned upon their users, following along the trajectories they previously utilized to then collide with those of the second wave. Cannon shell met cannon shell. Energy blast met energy blast. Massive explosions dotted the battlefield and powerful shockwaves made the waters churn below. I didn't think they would recover so quickly. The Arc of Time user frowned slightly. So much for dropping their morale by reversing time on the airships. No, you most definitely have affected them. The former second master of Fairy Tale smirked. That pause prior to this second wave shows just how much of an impact you've made. Whomever their commanding officer is, they did a wonderful job of making them force down whatever feelings they may have experienced when you repaired the airships, but now they know the true extent of your abilities. They are now aware that it is wasted ammunition to try and take us out with their guns and cannons. So we have succeeded in showing them the futility of fighting at long range. Indeed.
Hades nodded as the light of the explosions were cast upon his face. They will continue to fire their guns, of course, and as powerful as you are, you cannot keep their attacks at bay forever. The former second master of Fairy Tail paused and looked to Ultir's Lacrima. The younger Milkovich twin pumped a slight amount of magic into the teal-colored orb before the bearded visage of their airship's weapons commander came into view. Commander Smithers. Yes, Master. Smithers saluted as he was met with the visage of his superior. The main guns and the energy cannons are all primed, however, the Jupiter cannons will require an additional minute to fully charge. Relay the command to all ships, Commander. Hades' demonic eye glowed menacingly. Fire. Chusa-san. Yes, sir. The red-haired Akamichi patriarch didn't need any further instructions from Lahar as he flared his magic energy as a signal to his clansmen. Akamichis. Clear the air. Chusa-sama. The other Akamichi clan members spread out across the frontal line of ships took their places at the bows. Though few since the fall of Konohagakure 20 years ago, the Titan magic specialists were still a clan to be revered. Channeling their magic to their arms, a series of massive arms sprung into existence before they were all reared back. With a resounding battle cry, Chusa and his clansmen swung their arms forwards and clapped their hands together. The cumulative shockwave created a powerful gust of wind that scattered the heavy smoke in the embers, thus restoring direct line of sight for the Fury Navy.
The line is clear, Grand General, Chusa announced into his communication Lacrima. Proceed with the third wave. Status received. The command was relayed to the battleships and thus they proceeded to fire their third wave of attacks. However, as their attack arched through the air, it was then that the Fiorian Navy was able to gauge just how much firepower those 5 airships had in comparison to their 55 battleships. It was almost blow for blow as a barrage of bullets and energy beams were fired from Grimoire Heart and collided with their own rounds of ammunition. There were a few stray energy blasts throughout the line of explosions, but just as it seemed they would make contact with the naval vessels, the blasts appeared to be absorbed by a layer of blue light which rippled with each impact.
Very clever. Hades nodded in approval as he took note of the plasma energy shield. They made us think they were wide open when they actually weren't.
It also seems to only reveal itself upon contact with anything since it was invisible before we attacked.
An astute observation, my child. Do you think they can withstand the Jupiters? I would not wish to waste an attack from the Jupiters as a mere test of their defenses. The master of Grimoire Heart narrowed his eyes as he observed the barrier's area of coverage just as it was about to dissipate from the realm of visibility. Contact the command center of our ship. Have them scan for the shield generators for the barrier and then have airships 3 and 5 concentrate fire at those points. Once we take down the barrier, then we will fire the Jupiters.
Understood, Master. Spy Network HQ, Eastern Fiorian Mountains, Fury.
Status update. Naruto ordered as he strode into the tech room of the castle.
I got a message from Shukaku saying Grimoire Heart and the Rune Knights have already begun their battle. Kurama stated as he turned to Sue. How are things looking?
We have received confirmation from Gara-sama and Shukaku-sama that the battle is indeed ongoing and we have a visual of the battlefield on screen 8. Sue replied as she gestured to the aforementioned monitor which showed an overhead view of the Tenro Island region. From what we have been observing, Grimoire Heart's firepower is proving to be overwhelming and though the Rune Knights are capable of matching them, Grimoire Heart's positioning by aiming from above is allowing them to place more angulated, accurate shots. The plasma shield is absorbing many of the attacks that manage to break through their waves, Haru added. That won't last for long. Nobunaga informed the room's occupants as he pointed to a few ships scattered throughout the middle and rear of the Rune Knights' fleet. Now that Grimoire Heart is aware of the shields, they will most likely search for the generators to take them out. They have their backup defenses? Kurama asked. Well, sure they have those, but can that really hold up to a Jupiter cannon? Alexander's tone showed that he didn't really have a lot of faith in the Corp's defensive capabilities should the plasma shield get taken down. If Fairy Tail is there, they might. Ash piped in. I mean, they've got the S-class squad down there plus Makarov. Not to mention they've got 3 Dragonslayers too. On the topic of Fairy Tail, have there been any reports from Iron and Water Dragon? Yes, Fujin-sama. Sue nodded as she glanced down to the tablet in her hands. Both have sent in their reports and the content is practically the same in that the Rune Knights have Fairy Tail on standby. Standby? Naruto and Kurama looked at the green-haired woman with mild confusion. Yes, we are also not sure what Lahar has planned by keeping Fairy Tail out of the fight. Maybe the ones who were picked for S-class candidates, but I don't see a reason to put Makarov and the S-class mages on hold. The Kyuubi no Yoko hummed and thought. You think he's keeping them out to be aces in the holes if things go south? It's probable. The son of Agnologia replied to his Exceed partner, but he didn't dwell on the thought for too long. Any word from Gyuki and Isobu? Gyuki-sama and Isobu-sama are still submerged and awaiting orders according to a report from Seiken-sama. Yup. The slug-costumed Exceed wiped away a bit of alkaline dribble from his lips before it could fall on the ground, lest he once again face the wrath of the dark-skinned second in command of the establishment.
Isobu said he's fine and Gyuki's just kinda bored at the moment. With regards to Gyuki and Isobu, Seiken informed them of a change of plans. The room looked at Naruto in confusion before he shifted his haze away from the Rokubi to that of Nobunaga. Gaara spoke to me from my personal communication seal. Apparently, he and Shukaku managed to sneak into the engineering room aboard their airship and were able to retrieve the information about what those unknown attachments are and what they are for. We did receive a file from an unknown server. Nobunaga confirmed as he sifted through the spy network's files. Because of the size and the nature of the file, I didn't want to open it lest it be a virus or some sort of malware. Sue, sending it to you. Sue looked down at the tablet in her hands as the data was transferred to the device before she pulled up the schematics on the holographic projector. The three-dimensional data constructs showcased the 5 airships' blueprints. Sue tapped her tablet screen a few times and the data constructs reacted and the 5 airships began to shift and transform before their eyes. Oh, Haru gulped. So that's what that does. By the dragons. The engineer in Nobunaga couldn't help but be amazed. I mean, I thought I could design stuff, but this? How do you even begin to make this? Clearly Grimoire Heart has had a lot of time on their hands. Kurama frowned before his eyes narrowed. If the scaling for this thing is correct, then having Gyuki and Isobu prioritize this over defending against the Jupiters might actually be worth doing. People were going to die anyway, but it's best to not have them waste their energy blocking the Jupiter cannons when this is clearly a weapon Hades had under his belt the entire time. I'm on it, Ni-san, Seiken said as he began to establish the mental link with their aquatic-type siblings. Insert music. Kimetsu no Yaiba resolve. And I believe now is when Fujin-sama and Kurama-sama will plan to depart for Tenro, Sue asked. Your tone suggests you are still against this decision. Naruto replied, my decision. Is there something you wish to say? And, her reflexive act to respond in a manner that would befitting of her superiors was held back. Something which made said superiors look at her with quizzical expressions. Actually, yes there is. The tech room became slightly quieter in order to facilitate the act of eavesdropping. Oh, Kurama's crimson eyes burned with curiosity. Well, by all means, speak your mind. There was a level of intensity in the air that made Sue's throat dry. The dark green-haired woman, in all her time as second in command to these 2 monsters of magic, had never once talked back to them in the manner she was currently doing so. It was always just a way of poking fun at her rank within the spy network, but there was a kernel of truth too when her fellow former Phantom Lord guildmates said she held a soft spot in her heart for her superiors. Sue swallowed the lump in her throat and licked her drying lips in preparation. She calmed her nerves before meeting the much taller mage's gaze. Fujin-sama, Kurama-sama, as your second in command, I have always done as you have asked without question. To carry out your orders dutifully. That is what I believed was my duty ever since you formally placed the position upon me. The dark-skinned woman frowned slightly as she continued. However, there are many instances where you both perform tasks that causes you to leave the castle. Watching you go out on your own and fighting for what you want is inspiring, and I have the utmost confidence in your abilities to complete your missions and return home, but everything you do, Fujin-sama and Kurama-sama, you say it is for the sake of expansion of our spy network. Sue made an exaggerated gesture to the entire room to emphasize her point. But this entire escapade does not sound like something that would benefit us. We have been secretly helping the Magic Council by leaking information that we have Shukaku and Gaara obtain. We have been keeping an eye on the battlefield itself, sending Gyuki-sama and Isobu-sama to the front lines, and now both of you same battlefield. All of these actions clearly have a purpose, but it seems to be something that only the both are aware of. I can't help but wonder why. Why are we doing any of this? What is it that you are trying to achieve, Fujin-sama? The other occupants of the tech room dared not even breathe as they listened to Sue's words. These were actual conversations they've had amongst themselves in the past, but for obvious reasons, they would never question the orders they were given. The uncomfortable stares from Naruto and Kurama added another reason to the list of why they wouldn't want to question their superiors, but they were also not Sue. Someone who held both rank and a certain level of trust with the Ogo no Fujin and Onibi Myobo. You have kept these feelings at bay for quite some time it seems. I have. She confirmed with a stiff nod. You will not retract your outburst? Naruto asked. You will stand by your words? I have followed you for the majority of this past year to the best of my ability, and ordinarily I would remain quiet no matter how outlandish the command. Dark-colored eyes hardened like steel, but not this time. Only the executive members would dare to speak to us like this. Kurama chuckled. Looks like you guys have finally gotten some spunk. Kurama-sama. We were actually thinking of telling you guys what our endgame is later on, but if you feel this strongly about it then I see no reason to continue keeping you all in the dark. The Kyuubi no Yoko looked to the dark-skinned human, Crimson meeting Obsidian. When all of this is stuff involving Grimoire Heart is over, call everybody back to base. We'll talk. You will? She looked between the Kitsune costumed Exceed and the blue-eyed Dragonslayer. What we're doing helping the Magic Council, What your plans involving the other 10 wizard saints that we had to look into Gilgamesh, Scheherazade and Zhuge Everything? I swear an oath of the dragon, Su. Naruto stated, the sound of thunder rolling echoed throughout the castle as he made the binding promise. After all is said and done, we will tell you all everything. Oh. Su blinked owlishly. This was definitely not how she expected this conversation to go. This was not how anyone in the castle would have expected this conversation to go. Then I will hold to your oath, F. Fujin-sama. A stiff nod was all the reply she was given before the son of Acknowledge had turned around to exit the room. As the doors of the tech room closed behind them, Kurama hopped off of Naruto's head. The wings of his era magic stretched out of his upper back to keep him aloft. He chuckled as he heard the sound of Su falling to her knees, the adrenaline in her system likely running dry. She's a keeper, that one. The Kyuubi's grin stretched from ear to ear. I'm telling you, Naruto, even after we tell them everything. That remains to be decided. Indeed it does, but they'll stick with us, all of them. Naruto gritted his teeth and shook his head, ridding it of the myriad of thoughts that currently plagued his mind. We shall see, but for now, get Zabrak, Roshi and Wendy. We're heading for Tenro. Oh Captain, my Captain. FKS Terumi, Fiori and C. How did they even figure out where the shield generators were? Lahar shouted. I don't know, sir, one of the command center crew replied. But our left flank is open with the loss of generators 3 and 4. Status update. Another crew member shouted, we've just lost 5 ships. A report from Shuza-san, that 3 of his Titan squad will move in to guard the left flank by fully transforming. As if to confirm this fact, all crew members looked out of the Terumi's superstructure in time to see 3 heavily armored Akamichi rune knights standing at just shy of 100 feet tall, their arms crossed in front of their faces as they served as human shields for what portion of the left flank they could cover. Several more ships were lost from the energy cannon blasts that managed to scrape by causing Lahar to curse, the light of the burning ships reflecting in his eyes. Tyson, Alice. With me. Lahar ordered. Sir. The Major General and Lieutenant General followed their superior dutifully out of the command center and to the open deck of the Terumi. Insert music. 2 steps from Hell Flight of the Silverbird. The sounds of combat became that much louder the moment they stepped out onto the deck, but it was white noise to them. Years of experience on the battlefront had turned them into hardened veterans of combat. Explosions and gunfire were nothing to them, but the screams of death were still something they could never get used to. Lahar pushed it all aside as he turned his dark-colored eyes towards the grimoire heart airships and tapped the back of his right glove. A pulse of magic activated the circle of runes present on the glove, and in a flash of white eternano, the Grand General of Fury now held a longbow made of shining silver. With practiced ease, the Grand General pulled back on the bowstring. I'll do what I can to divert the onslaught, Lahar said as he glanced to the 2 rune knights beside him. Tyson, aim for the 2 airships that are targeting the shield generators, and once you think you have a clear shot, Alice, you hit them hard. You got it, boss. Tyson replied with a tip of his trucker hat. You think you can handle shooting down that heavy a barrage with fail not? Alice tried to withhold the thought of failure, but she couldn't help it. Not when she was given such a close look at what they were up against. I didn't spend a 2-year exchange program in the Archer clan in 7 practicing the bow for nothing, Alice. The bespectacled bowman replied. Fail not being given to me by my master is testament to that. In the field of magecraft, caster-type magic was always seen as the superior form compared to holder-type. They were known to have larger magic energy stores, and because the power of their spells was directly proportional to said stores, they were quite known for being show-offs and users of flashy, destructive attacks. Especially users of fire magic. The majority of the Rune Knight Corps, while they were educated in the theory and usage of magic weapons and weaponry in general, consisted of caster types. For the reasons stated beforehand, it gave them all superiority complexes in the sense that they believed themselves to be destined for glory on the battlefield. Lahar, being one of the holder-type users in the Corps, was quite often bullied for this fact. He was physically weaker in the initial stages of his training in the barracks, but he grew strong and cunning, taking up the use of long-range magic weaponry. The bow and arrow adhered to his preferences, and through sheer hard work, he gained the attention of those above him. Head Captain Han, the strongest close combat user in the Corps despite being not able to use magic in the slightest, took him under his wing as a personal apprentice. Grand General Shiba, a holder-type magic user herself, coddled him like a child despite being only 5 years older than him. However, her blatant favoritism truly shone when she allowed him to take part in one of the exchange programs to learn archery under the Archer clan in the Kingdom of Seven on a personal recommendation. Interestingly enough, the majority of the Archer clan's masters very rarely used a bow. One would think the Archer clan would actually be composed of archers. Lahar was lucky enough to study under one of the few bow and arrow users, a descendant of Tristan and the former wielder of the bow he now wielded.
Silver light outlined the entire bow. The air between string and bow seemed to ripple, as if the mere act of drawing the bowstring had summoned forth an otherworldly force to Lahar's side. With hawk-like vision, the eyes of a trained marksman took in the entire scene before him. The rain of fire, light and metal that aimed to wipe out their defenses, that was his target. 2 years with my master, and even then I could only pee hundreds of skills he knew. The silver light shone a bit brighter and a mighty wind made his cloak billow wildly. I was encouraged, forced, to endure hellish training for which I was promised that I would be rewarded without fail. I was to take this one skill that I could learn and hone it to its utmost limit. To make this arrow, an arrow that pierces any and all things. Fantasia of lamentation. He released the string and suddenly, it seemed as if space itself warped. This one spell of Failnot was one which allowed the user to use the very air itself as a projectile by flicking the string. It was in essence, a vacuum arrow. Air resistance became negligible and the one projectile of compressed air and magic split forth to become a multitude that none could hope to count, even if they were visible. Thousands upon thousands of arrows forged from the vacuum dispersed the equally innumerable projectiles from Grimoire Heart's airships. Explosions dotted the skies, but they were quickly snuffed out as the vacuum arrows did not allow oxygen to thrive and thus the flames were not allowed to do so either. What had once been a wall of projectiles was reduced to an empty void within a matter of seconds. It was a spectacular display of power, and if there were any rune knights present who once questioned the skill and power of their grand general, they no longer existed. Tyson. Burst magic. Hellzone grenade. Tyson shouted. The Major General took advantage of the currently open airspace and unleashed a barrage of neon yellow orbs from the magic seal that formed in front of his hands. They arced through the air like ballistic missiles towards the Grimoire Heart airships 3 and 5, the ones currently targeting the naval vessels carrying the plasma shield generators. Unfortunately, some of the energy-based projectiles were lost in fiery explosions as the airships, guns and energy cannons had not ceased in their activities. Numerous Hellzone grenades detonated in fiery explosions, but there were those that powered through to arrive at their destinations, with the majority having managed to encircle Airship 3. Once the orbs were in position, Tyson clenched his outstretched hands into tight fists and the energy orbs responded by rocketing into the airship from nearly all available angles, taking out several guns and energy cannons in the process. Lieutenant General. The veteran sniper turned to the golden-eyed woman. Light magic. Heat ray. Alice Brosnan's eyes shone brightly as magic energy collected within them. She charged the attack to its maximum before unleashing a powerful blast of concentrated light that generated a heat so intense, the surrounding air rippled. It speared through the energy cannon blasts from Grimoire Heart's Airship 3 as if they weren't even there, and the rain of bullets from one of the vessel's guns were reduced to molten slag in midair. Finally, the beam of light made contact with its intended target and the airship began to go up in smoke. Fuck yeah, Tyson whooped. However, the cry of victory met a swift end as a pulse of violet magic energy from Airship 1 alerted the Major General to Ultir's usage of her Arc of Time. Mother of fuck. How many fucking times can she do this? Alice's tolerance flew out the window ever since the second rewind spell's use. Just how much magic does this woman have? Ultir panted, sweat dripping down her forehead and the sides of her face as the violet aura around her body flickered out of existence. She fell to her knees in exhaustion, Hades removing the hand he had rested upon her shoulder. I'm sorry, Master. The younger Milkovich twin wheezed. Even with that bit of magic you just gave me, I don't believe I can manage another rewind spell. You did splendidly, Ultir. The demon blood holder smiled affectionately at his second in command. I must admit that you performed beyond my expectations. To be able to reverse the destruction of the airships in addition to keeping our weapon stocks in a continuous temporal loop to prevent a significant loss in ammunition for a total of 7 times is no small feat. It seems Brain's experiments, in addition to your unlocking your second origin, proved to be a fruitful endeavor. The daughter of withheld the urge to flinch upon being reminded of the inhumane methods which led to her current level of power, but out of respect for the man before her, she responded with a nod of gratitude for the praise. Hades reached down, picking up the Lacrima from the floor. With a pulse of magic, the face of Commander Smithers once again formed within the orb. Commander Smithers. Master, the loop that Ultir-sama formed to keep our weapon stocks from reducing has been deactivated. Is everything alright? The bearded man replied with a matter-of-fact tone, Ultir is merely resting, but she will recover. There is no need to worry yourself over such a thing. Hades stated with a matter-of-fact tone. What is the status of our weapon stocks now that the loop has been discontinued? 55% of our bullet stock is gone, and the Lacrima supplying power to the energy cannons have now reached 70%. We have been attacking practically non-stop since our arrival, Master, but we cannot keep up this type of offensive for much longer if we don't take down those shield generators within the hour. Then that means all is going as well as it should. Master, if we are beginning to experience some sort of trouble, then that means our opponents are doing much worse. Hades smirked, his devil's eye glowing in a manner that seemed to reflect his amusement. However, we do not need to take out their entire fleet. I just needed to create a gap large enough for me to draw out Makarov. Your orders. Continue with the effort to destroy the shield generators with our medium artillery from ships 4 and 5. Hades's crimson eye shone brightly within its socket and the elderly guild master broke out into a maniacal grin which would forever haunt the mind of Commander Smithers. Fire Jupiters 1, 2 and 3 with the aim to wipe out their left flank. Command Center FKS Terumi, Fiorin C. Lahar felt somewhat guilty for leaving Tyson and Alice alone on the deck to continue being active long-range support, but as Grand General, he could not remain in active combat for too long. 'Twas the burden of leadership. That was amazing, Grand General. You wiped out all those attacks like it was nothing. So cool. The bespectacled man was greeted with compliments and applause for his efforts. It raised their morale. That was good. They needed their spirits to be high in order to continue this battle of attrition that Grimoire Heart dragged them into, but spirit and tenacity could only go so far.
Grand General. One of the crew members approached Lahar with the communication lacrima in hand. Reports from Captains Shikaku and Inoichi. Was this it, Shikaku-san? Inoichi-san? Troublesome news, sir. The Nara Patriarch's voice resonated from the lacrima. Inoichi's voice popped immediately afterwards with an equal level of displeasure. Reports from several of the battleships have come in regarding ammunition. The rear left flank is down by 60%, and it's getting a bit worse since the shield generators were destroyed on their end. Some of the members from Chao's unit are protecting them the best they can, which is helping them when it comes to channeling power in order to recharge the energy cannons, but as thick as their armor is, they can only hold out for so long. From their view aboard the Terumi's superstructure, Lahar was able to catch a glimpse of the 3 Titan magic users. Well-forged metal plating bore numerous cracks from having to withstand repetitive large-caliber bullets, and other areas, particularly the forearm plating when they had to protect their faces, glowed bright crimson from having to withstand the heat from energy cannon blasts. Inoichi-san, tell Shuza to have those 3 withdraw the moment he thinks they can't withstand the barrage for much longer. Kai became silent as he was most likely relaying the order to Shuza. What's the status of the right flank and middle fleet? We're faring a bit better due to our shield generators still being functional, Shikaku stated. We're running close to falling below 50%. We've only just started and we're already in a battle of attrition. The dark-haired Grand General clicked his tongue. He may be a bit early, but we need to get in close and remove Ultir from the equation. So long as she is using her arc of time to repair the airships when we strike them down, we can't do anything. We are wasting valuable ammunition at this point.
I share your view, but even if we were to go for an all-out assault, we may end up leaving ourselves unguarded, particularly the left flank.
You're expecting an attack on that end? I've already calculated it to be a likely event. Urza-sama and Gildart's Clive have been repositioned on that end, and I am ready to give the command to have Laxus and Makarov-sama attack the airships. Send them out. The communication lacrima lost its glow as their discussion ended, but the moment that problem ended, a new one reared its head. Grand General. What now? The man was exasperated, but his eyes widened as he was directed to the flashing lights and colors on the radar screens. It was red. Red was never a good color. High-level Eternano levels are being detected from 3 of the airships. They're firing the Jupiter cannons. Shit. The curs echoed throughout the command center and it seemed as if the entire room shook. Are they aiming for the left flank? Yes. The airships have adjusted their trajectories slightly and are most likely aiming for the unguarded left flank. Contact Urza-sama so that she and Gildarts can immediately prepare themselves. Make an immediate order to have Shuza recall those members of his unit that are currently protecting the left flank, and have Makarov-sama and Laxus immediately move out for a counterattack.
Deck FKS Enterprise, Fiorin C. It was orderly yet chaotic as the crew of the Enterprise had been issued the order to abandon ship. The sounds of the various captains and major generals barking out orders to the common infantry soldiers were white noise to Urza and Gildarts as they faced their eyes forward. As the Akamichi unit shrunk themselves down back to normal size for the retreat, the 2 S-class mages now had a clear view of the bright purple rays of light that came from the mouths of the massive cannons of the Grimoire Heart airships. So how's that pretty face of yours holding up? He chuckled before pointing at his cheek, referencing to the bandage that was still present on the Titania's face. I mean, Natsu dealt you one hell of a punch. A love tap. A love tap that knocked you the fuck out. That makes the score 125-1 in my favor. Wow, you actually kept count. The ace of fairy tale laughed loudly. I can't believe you would actually do something with that much effort over the course of so many years. Gildarts couldn't but laugh even louder than before when, in a complete un-Urza-like fashion, she flipped him the bird. Struck a nerve have I? She shoved the armored digit further into his face for emphasis as a response. So, all witty banter was thrown out the window as the crash magic user became more focused on the task at hand. The roar of the Jupiter cannons echoing across the seas. You look like ready for this, kiddo. I blocked one of them before. Which is quite a feat, but this is 3. I don't think that even you and I can hold off that much firepower. Gildarts frowned slightly as he clenched and unclenched the fingers of his automail arm.
Maybe if I had both arms. Forgive my bluntness, Gildarts, but like you said, there are 3 of them. I highly doubt having both arms is going to provide a significant advantage here. Fair point. Gildarts' eyes then glowed with ivory light as he called upon his magic, the whine of the Jupiter cannons growing ever louder. Look alive. Insert music. 2 steps from hell never back down. The 3 cannon mouths glowed with violet light, the concentrated eternano now reaching its maximum input levels, before being unleashed as 3 devastating beams of pure destruction. The waves' pressure exhumed by the blasts rocked the seas below, and Gildarts raised his flesh and blood arm in defiance. Crash magic. Disintegration, his ultimate spell, the spell which held its own against the roar of a certain blonde Dragonslayer. The very atmosphere itself shuddered from the sheer force of the spell, and a wave of bright white energy rushed forth from Gildarts' fist. The attack met the triad of Jupiter blasts head-on, and a mighty clash ensued as the beams were now being broken down on a molecular level. Beads of sweat traced the sides of Gildarts' face, his teeth gritting as he felt his body shift backwards slightly. While having only one arm did indeed limit his abilities, having both arms would have surely helped in holding off the attack for a little bit longer. If they managed to hold off the Jupiter blasts in their entirety, then more power to them, but the goal here was to merely ensure the evacuation of the Enterprise and the other surrounding ships was completed. Damn it all. He dug his heels in and released a roar, his magic spiking to its apex. Has it even been a minute? It actually has, Urza replied to him. Are you fucking serious? He exclaimed in shock before releasing a nervous chuckle. Man, I'm doing better than I thought, but by the dragons. I'm already feeling tired as hell. I really must be getting old. Aren't you the one who says he's a spry 45? Gildarts smirked and offered a mischievous wink to the crimson-haired wizard saint, and don't you forget it. Said spry 45-year-old was indeed doing well despite his handicaps, but not even the mighty Gildarts Clive could fight against 3 Jupiter cannons. His concentration to hold the disintegration spell wavered before the blast tore through the air at breakneck speeds towards them. The first barrier was breached, and thus it was time for the second to take its place. HRAH. Urza slammed the halves of her shield together, and her magic energy generated a massive emerald magic circle. The combined might of 3 Jupiter cannons bore down upon her defensive barrier, and while one blast was certainly within her realm of capability, never had she thought that the density of 3 could be so great. Her knees nearly buckled upon impact and her arms immediately began to shake, her muscles screaming as they fought against the targeted attack of Grimoire Heart. It's so. She gritted her teeth and felt a bit winded as she felt her body skidding backwards slightly from the force of the impact, so heavy. Makarov-sama, Laxus. Are you in position? Lahar called out over the communication lacrima. We have a visual on Urza-sama's barrier and it doesn't seem like it will hold out for much longer. Don't get your panties in a twist, General. The overconfident tone of the younger Dreyar replied. Gigi will stop that Jupiter blast without breaking a sweat. The barrier bore a spiderweb of cracks, said cracks only growing larger with each passing second. The sweat poured from her forehead to the point that it formed small puddles at her feet. Even with Gildarts coming to her aid, supplying her with his own magical energy to keep her barrier going, the Jupiter cannons of Grimoire Heart seemed positively unstoppable. The sound of her barrier breaking was akin to glass shattering. Urza and Gildarts glanced up with wide eyes as the bright violet beam cast its glow over their bodies. Their respective lives flashed before their eyes, but the roar of the Jupiter cannon blasts was quickly drowned out by the mighty shout of their 200-foot-tall guild master. Fairy Law. A golden magic circle sprung into existence, the insignia of fairy tale shining brightly within its center, before a powerful wave of magic energy washed over the enteriad of energy blasts seemed to have vanished from existence as the wave of gold made contact with them, and continued on its path towards the Grimoire Heart airships. This battle is over, Grimoire Heart, Makarov announced. Mavis Vermilion was truly a genius in terms of her great intellect and her ability as a mage. Even he, who came across her as a child with Yuri Dreyar and Warred Sequin all those years ago, learned a great deal from her. But as the eldest and strongest of her 3 companions, Mavis saw fit to use him as her advisor and her confidant. She sought guidance from him when she completed the unfinished spell that was simply known as Law, and thus he knew the ins and outs of Fairy Law. So he knew that Fairy Law was not something as simple as an all-powerful glow of golden light that ended all battles. No, it was much more complex than that. It was a targeted manipulation of Eternano on the enemy, drawing it out and transferring it into those who bear the mark of Fairy Tale to heal and restore vitality to those the user wished. In essence, it followed the law of conservation of mass, a law involving matter. So if the universal law of opposites was to be brought into effect, then in order to counter a spell involving the manipulation of matter, then it would only serve to simply counter it by manipulating the opposite of matter. Antimatter generation was no small feat, but through magic and years upon years of research, Hades finally worked out the formula. Hades chuckled from his perch atop his airship, an orb of purple-black energy held within his palms. You've retained that stupid level of overconfidence that you had even as a boy, Makarov. The orb in his arms pulsated and a large magic seal appeared in front of the airship. It is time you learned humility, boy. Hades slammed his palms together and the orb he held was converted to a powerful pulse of violet black, equal in size and intensity to that of the approaching fairy law spell. Grimoire Law. Insert music. Naruto Shippuden Purge Goddess. The two pulses of energy raced towards one another and Makarov felt the hairs on his arms and the back of his neck raise. Something was going to go terrible wrong the moment the two energies would collide. He felt it in his bones. He wouldn't be able to move fast enough to get Urza and Gildarts out of the way. But luckily there was his grandson who could move as quickly as a lightning bolt. Laxus. Get Gildarts and Urza to safety. On it, activating thunder in heaven. Laxus's bright blue form sped across the airspace and quickly reached down, snatching Urza and Gildarts up in his hands. They retreated behind the plasma energy barriers and once their safety was assured, Makarov turned his glowing golden eyes back to the oncoming Grimoire Law spell. How would a dark mage like Hades even know a spell based on the parent spell of law? There were many questions running through his head, but the wizened guild master found his thoughts coming to a halt the moment his spell and Hades's met. The very air itself seemed to rupture as matter and antimatter met. Two materials that were never meant to coexist for simply making contact on the atomic level meant the unleashing of energy on a scale equivalent to that of a therion. The world was engulfed in light as a massive explosion rocked the seas and made the heavens themselves tremble. Makarov was sent careening through the air and the Grimoire Heart airships were sent into dizzying tailspins. The output of the explosion and its accompanying shockwave was that massive. The skies turned dark as storm clouds rolled it out of seemingly nowhere. Hurricane-force winds swirled and then the energy and light of the explosion began to collapse in on itself as what appeared to be a singularity formed before the two warring parties. An empty sphere of complete blackness that seemed to draw in light itself occurred at the point of contact between the two spells unleashed by the third master of Fairy Tail and said guild's former second master. The saving grace of the entire situation though was that the singularity vanished just as quickly as it came. The atomic instability of matter clashing with antimatter being an almost instantaneous process that resulted in both types of energy canceling each other out. What the hell was that? Gildarts managed to utter. They stopped. Urza's eyes were like a deer's, wide and unblinking. They stopped fairy law. What kind of monsters are we even fighting? Laxus growled, lightning sparking off his transformed body. Nobody is supposed to be able to handle Gigi when he's like that. Especially when he uses his trump card. The same level of surprise echoed across the Fiorian Rune Knight forces. Hades climbed back to his feet, shaking his head clear of the cobwebs that came from having his airships nearly knocked out of the sky from the explosion. He could always provide Ultir with some extra magic and have her rewind time to bring them back had they crashed, but the level of destruction that came with fending off fairy law was a bit beyond the scope of his calculations. However, the stopping of the ultimate deterrent served its purpose just as all his other modes of attack had done before. He could practically feel the morale drop in his enemy's forces, his amusement escaping in the form of a small laugh. He channeled his magic, his crimson eye glowing for a brief moment as he suddenly began to levitate. The master of Grimoire Heart hovered across the Fiorian Sea and paused as he came to float before Makarov Dreyar, the 200-foot titan having just recovered from the blast. Still the same as always, aren't you, boy? The way the elder Dreyar flinched showed just how quick Makarov had come to recognize both his voice and his way of speaking. I am impossible. The golden light in his eyes had long since died away, and so Purhito Gaybald was able to see the surprise present in the dark-colored eyes of his successor. It can't be? You should be. Old? Dead? Hades's devil's eye shone brightly and a toothy grin threatened to split his face. Come Makarov, my boy, let me show you that right now. At this very moment, I have never felt more alive. Tenro Island. 40 years. That was how many years had gone by since the title of Fairy Tail's Guildmaster was passed on to him. Now 80 years old, this meant that Makarov had been 40 years old when he was appointed Guildmaster, but the passage of time had not been kind to the elder Dreyar when it came to his health and vitality. On the other hand, Purhito Gaybald, if Makarov was doing his mental math correctly, would currently be beyond 100 years of age. It was almost unfair to the Titan magic user to see his predecessor the way he was now. Ignoring the malefic, violet aura and glowing crimson eye in his right socket, the former second master of Fairy Tail was almost exactly the same as he had been when he retired from Fairy Tail to go on a traveling trip around the continent. From his lithe yet strong frame to his silvery white hair, it was as if time itself had not affected Purhito for the past 40 years. Little did he know of the lengths to which Hades went in order to regain this form. Ultir, his voice carried out over the moderately far distance between himself and his second-in-command. Yes, master? Get the other kin and meet me on the island? Hades cracked his neck in anticipation. I want to stretch my legs for a bit. As you wish. Ultir ran inside the airship to do as instructed. Hades gave a grandfatherly smile to the young woman, a smile that Makarov once had directed towards him once upon a time. It only made him that much more confused at the former second master of fairy tale. "Master Purhito, what happened to you?" Makarov asked. "Why are you doing this?" "Oh, this and that." The devil bloodholder replied vaguely. "As for the white of the matter, it is far too complex to completely explain my machinations to you right now." The centennial began looking over his successor. The wrinkles on his face were a distinct contrast to the strong, rippling muscles of his titan form. "You've truly gotten old, boy. Time has not been kind to you." A stabbing pain entered Makarov's chest. At first he thought it was his heart acting up again, or it was the emotional stress response to seeing his mentor alive, but the pain was revealed to be due to being impaled on the business end of magically forged chains of Eternano. "Master Purhito." The betrayal was paramount in the titan magic user's eyes, and Hades capitalized on it. His devil's eyes shone, and with the blood of a demon flowing through his veins, Hades' muscles visibly bulged beneath his clothing as he pulled on his magic chains. At his maximum height of 200 feet, Makarov's weight was easily that of a battleship's, if not greater. So when the centennial dark mage threw Makarov through the air like a rag doll with no visible show of effort, it was not just amazing, but also practically disrespectful. Earth met sky for Fairy Tail's third master, and the momentum of Purhito's swing forced the tip of his magic chains to free itself from Makarov's flesh in a splash of blood. With a cry of pain, the titan of Fairy Tail slammed into Tenro's coastline. His momentum carried him further inland, and Makarov lay groaning on his back. Hades glanced down in his hands, clenching and unclenching his fists with a nod of approval. He expected the demon's blood to have restored his power to its former glory, but it far exceeded his expectations. "Come on, get up, boy," Hades bellowed, his devil's eye glowing with glee. "You will make a fine warm-up after all these years." Ozone filled the air, and Hades felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. A boom of thunder seemed to shake the sky itself, and the glow from Laxus's thunder in heaven spell washed over Hades' body. Hades would admit that he did not expect Laxus to be capable of such a feat of speed, but a strike to the face was always predictable, especially as said strike was coming from a holder of the Dreyar bloodline. "I'll kill you for doing that to Gigi." A swiftly raised forearm blocked the backhand blow aimed for his neck, a small shockwave making Hades' hair shift. Black and crimson eyes looked upon the face of the angry young mage, and Hades could only chuckle at how much the lightning magic user reminded him of his guild's successor. "You really are Makarov's blood, aren't you?" "Damn right." Laxus roared as he moved to unleash a glowing blue fist. Hades quickly avoided it by simply leaning his head back. "You're straightforward." Another punch was let loose, which Hades dodged by tilting his head. "It shows in your fighting style." Laxus snarled as he followed up a hook shot that would have probably ruptured the kidneys of a normal man, but the dark mage swung his forearm across to deflect the blow. Hades then raised his other arm, hitting Laxus in the throat with enough force to temporarily cut off the lightning magic user's breathing before crashing a strong punch to the stomach. Laxus tumbled through the air, the world a dizzying spiral of blue and white to the point that he could not differentiate the sky from the sea. He managed to right himself, a couple coughs echoing through the air as he regained his ability to breathe. Hades capitalized on Laxus's moment of recovery, and a violet magic seal formed above the younger Dreyar's form with a mere hand movement. Seal magic. Amaterasu formula number 50. Gravity increased tenfold, and Laxus found himself being forced to move in a direction not of his own choosing. However, the electrokinetic mage's body relinquished its physical form, and Hades watched with mild fascination at the tactic. Laxus converted his body to lightning, and thus having no mass with which for the gravity seal to act upon. He escaped the trap which would have drowned him beneath the waves and moved at the speed of lightning. He returned to his physical form, his fist charged with electrical energy as he reared it back. Lightning magic. Crushing fist of majestic thunder. The blow landed, and a resounding shockwave echoed through the air like the boom of thunder. The spell itself then activated, and a beam of pure lightning sent Hades rocketing through the air. Laxus roared as he refused to give his opponent any room to recover, following after him to rain down powerful blows that knocked Hades around as if he were a living pinball. Lightning magic. Voltage hammer. Laxus clasped his hands over his head and swung them down in a violent arc. The blow struck true, and Hades descended at an angle, slamming into the sands that made up Tenro's coastline. A large column of the granulated earth rose up from the impact, but Hades' momentum caused him to skip across the island like a stone. He quickly recovered his bearings, and the Dark Guild Master flew through the air, weaving through the foliage before bursting through the canopy, his eyes glancing every which way for the younger Dreyar. His eyes narrowed as he caught sight of him, an electric blue magic seal hovering in front of Laxus's hands. Lightning magic. 1,000 thunderbolts. The electrical weapons rocketed towards Hades, surrounding him in a hemisphere of lightning. There was no feasible way to dodge the onslaught, but that was merely an annoyance for the centennial who spent the vast majority of his life studying the laws of magic.
Elemental magic was practically primary school level reading, inclusive of their strengths and weakness. Wind magic. Swift blade shower. The leaves shifted beneath him as the wind bent to his will. A gray-green magic seal formed above his head before unleashing a storm of wind blades. Each blade arced through the air, easily matching the number of Laxus's thunderbolts and meeting them head-on. Each thunderbolt was reduced to mere sparks as it made contact with the high-speed wind blades. A few more thunderbolts managed to sneak through the onslaught of Hades' counterstrike, but the devil blood holder dodged them with ease. The trees that were struck became blackened and set aflame as the leaves were burned away and the bark channeled the electrical currents into the earth. However, Hades' eyes widened as he noticed one of the lily alter its trajectory mid-flight. You won't fool me with such a simple tactic, boy. Hades raised his hands, a crimson magic seal hovering before his left hand while an azure one sprung forth from his right. A tongue of raging hot fire and a stream of pressurized water rushed forth from the magic seals towards the speeding lightning bolt that was Laxus. Laxus's lightning body spell ended and with a thunderous boom, the younger mage was forced to make a series of evasive maneuvers as the fire and water spells chased after him. His body sparked with magic and lightning before the sound barrier broke, turning on a dime to fly directly between the two oncoming elemental attacks and straight towards his target. Hades crossed his arms quickly, effectively blocking the outstretched fists that were aimed for his chest. The two combatants were carried through the air once more, but Laxus chose to head downwards instead. He pushed Hades through the foliage, snapping thick trees and ruining various pieces of flora before kicking off the elderly mage's stomach to send him crashing into the ground. The earth cratered as Hades managed to go into a quick flip and land on his feet, but the moment his feet touched down, a trio of golden yellow magic seals sprung to life beneath them.
What on earth? Light magic, 3-pillar lock. The magic seals shown before 3 large pillars of hardened light energy burst forth, stabbing themselves into Hades' arms and stomach. The ground then began to rumble and shake, a haphazard series of cracks forming before the very earth Hades stood upon was being hefted high into the air. A large hand was shown to be the source of this phenomenon and Hades' eyes narrowed in anger as he saw Makarov, now in his normal height, but with his arm plunged into the ground. It was likely the third master of fairy tale had dug a tunnel with his hand in its titan form before enlarging it even further to attack from below. The master of Grimoire Heart was then knocked out of his thoughts as the roar of the younger Drayar met his ears. Magic and lightning filled the air above with the scent of ozone. A condensed orb of lightning easily matching the surface area of the piece of torn rock Hades was standing upon held tightly in the blonde mage's grip. Lightning magic. Thunderbolt destruction. You're crafty little bastards, I'll give you that much, Hades commented as the orb of lightning crashed down upon him. A powerful electrical shockwave seemed to rock the heavens themselves and the piece of rock cracked heavily. However, the two dryers of fairy tale were forced to stare in awe as Hades was wrapped in an aura of violet-black flames and a massive hand of said flames held back Laxus's spell. The pillars of light which had once held him in place were burned away by the demonic flames and steam flowed from the gaping holes in his limbs and stomach to reveal freshly healed wounds. The devil's eye glowed brightly as if to let all those present know that Perhito's healing factor was as a result of its doing. What the hell are you? Laxus exclaimed as he tried to push past the resistance brought about by Hades' elemental limb. It was an effort in futility however, as Hades pushed back against the orb of lightning and an explosion of lightning sent its user tumbling through the air. The limb of demonic flame then vanished before Hades summoned forth his trademark chain magic. The sharp ends which had once dug into the flesh of the titan of fairy tale now embedded themselves into the rock which he stood upon. Hades gripped the magically forged chains tightly before flipping off the edge of the rock. His muscles contracted and with a loud battle cry, the demonic dark mage wrenched the piece of the earth out of Makarov's grip to then swing at the elderly Drayar. Makarov would have none of it as he quickly drew back his fist from the tunnel and enlarged it to shatter the oncoming projectile with a literally titanic punch. Earth magic. Earth flow spears. The devil's eye shone brightly within its socket as Hades slammed onto the ground with crater-creating force. The earth rumbled and a series of lengthy earth spears erupted forth to impale Makarov through and through. GG. A boom echoed across the island's airspace as Laxus rocketed through the air and snatched his grandfather up before he could be run through. Laxus dug his heels into the earth to then go into a no-handed cartwheel. As he was upside down, he opened his mouth and inhaled deeply, lightning and magic collecting within his chest. Lightning magic. Thunder Force Cannon. It was similar to his Reiryu no Hoko back when he was a second-generation Dragonslayer, but it was an excellent source of inspiration for this particular spell's inception. The beam of blue voltage speared through the earth and spears, turning them to dust before crashing into Hades with terrific force. A powerful explosion of lightning rocked Tennu Island, but Makarov and Laxus both knew that such a spell would not be enough to put down the rejuvenated dark mage. Light magic. Giant's Wrath, lightning magic, motor drive. Light and lightning empowered their respective users before the two dryers sped towards their target. Hades' eyes widened as he was caught on the receiving end of both fairy tale mage's fists. A powerful shockwave raced out from the points of contact, time seeming to slow down for the dark mage as the impacts against his face registered with his body. He rocketed across the island's landscape, a massive dust cloud marking his path before he fell over the edge of a waterfall and crashed into the lake below. Laxus and Makarov were hot on his trail as they too jumped over the waterfall's edge. Makarov stood atop his grandson's shoulders as said grandson retained aerial superiority. Lightning magic. Thousand thunderbolts, light magic, rain of light. Golden yellow magic seals burst into existence above the two fairy tale mages before concentrated beams of the respective elements raced towards Hades. The lake surface turned into a physical representation of oblivion as each bolt of lightning and every beam of light caused a pillar of water to explode into existence. Hades exploded out from beneath the water's surface, utilizing earth magic to raise a pillar of stone up from the lake bed. Attacks from the two Drayar mages struck him, but his healing factor treated them nearly instantaneously. He then hopped off of the earth pillar as a series of amber-colored magic seals formed around it. The pillar shattered into perfectly cut cubes before glowing with demonic violet magic energy. Earth magic. Meteor rain. The cubes of burning earth rocketed towards the S-class level mages, but Makarov enlarged his hands before clapping them together to create a devastating shockwave that sent every single projectile off course. The area around the waterfall exploded as each piece of magically charged stone detonated upon impact. As the lights of the explosions temporarily blinded the two fairy tale mages, Hades struck forth as he formed a series of hand motions. Seal magic. Amaterasu Formula number 50. Gravity increased tenfold and brought both dryers down to a more suitable level. Chains of magic sprung forth from the Centennial Mage's hands before they wrapped themselves around Laxus and Makarov's waists. With a disgusting amount of ease, he pulled his opponents towards him and crashed a devastating kick into Makarov's chest while a powerful fist dug into Laxus's face. However, Hades did not let the two younger mages escape as he continuously pulled them back in to receive further punishment. Blows rained down upon the two fairy tale mages, and if it weren't for the enhanced durability that came with the giant's wrath and thunder and great heaven spells, they surely would have had some shattered bones and Makarov likely would have already been a shattered corpse. That seems like a sufficient amount of punishment, don't you think so, boy? Hades relinquished his grip on the chains and thus Laxus and Makarov were now allowed to soar through them from Hades' final kick and punch carried them away. However, they were granted little time to recover as a pair of dark violet magic seals formed on either side of them. One of Laxus's right and the other on Makarov's left. Seal magic. Amaterasu Formula number 28. Ga. Powerful explosions of energy erupted forth from the seals and sent grandfather and grandson crashing into each other with devastating force. Seal magic. Amaterasu Formula number 52. A concentrated pillar of gravitational energy carried Laxus and Makarov beneath the lake's surface and carved a tunnel in the water as they were slammed into the lake bed, laying within their own personal crater. Now we end this. A few hand motions were formed once more and Hades' magic spiked drastically as a violet magic seal formed beneath Laxus and Makarov. Seal magic. Amaterasu Formula number 100. The magic seal shone brightly before a powerful explosion of magic energy rocked the island. The lake's waters were evaporated and the dome of light and energy tore apart the lake bed and nearly 1/8 of the entire island's landmass. The rising dust cloud was dispersed by the accompanying shockwave and Hades' eyes narrowed in annoyance as he saw Makarov sweating slightly as he stood in front of his grandson. Both of them were both covered in minor burns and dirt, but were otherwise unharmed as they lay within the center of a massive crater that was easily twice the size of Fairy Tale's Guild Hall. The remainder of the lake waters trickled down into the deep hemispherical mark of Hades' destructive spell. What caught Hades' interest though was that the two dryers were surrounded by a trio of ethereal pillars, each pillar encircled by dark magic seals. Maximum defense seal. 3 pillar gods. Hades remarked with a smirk of what could only be described as pride. So you've finally mastered the one piece of seal magic I managed to teach you, boy? I was never one to be on the defensive, Master Purhito. You know that as well as I do. Makarov replied as the pillars vanished from view. But you had me learn this one just in case, and now I can see why you did. It was quite helpful. Cheeky brat. Hades surged forwards through the air, his leg already reared back as he touched down in front of Makarov. The powerful kick dug into the dwarf's body and the 80-year-old guildmaster's eyes widened, spittle and blood escaping his lips. He rocketed through the air and slammed into what had once been the cliffside that the remainder of the waterfall fell from. GG. Laxus glared at the former second master of Fairy Tale before he vanished from view in a spark of lightning. Sparks of lightning decorated the air around Hades as he glanced every which way in an attempt to keep track of the swift-moving S-class mage. The earth exploded behind him and Hades turned around, firing off a blast of violet magic energy. But the spell hit nothing but air as the Dark Guild Master caught sight of the hole in the ground. The ground rumbled beneath his feet and rays of azure-colored light bled through the cracks which formed. Laxus emerged from the bowels of the earth and a powerful uppercut crashed against Hades's lower jaw with terrific force. A powerful shockwave formed from the impact as the dark mage was carried skyward. Lightning magic. Mjolnir. It was only through years of experience and battle-hardened reflexes that he was able to regain his bearings to perform a mid-air barrel roll. The hairs on the back of his neck rose in response to the threads of lightning which lanced from the spell named for the mighty hammer of the Nordic thunderer. Hades smirked as he turned to Laxus. "Your aim requires work, it seems. You'd think that, wouldn't you?" Laxus grinned toothily. "I am Hevet, GG." A bright shine of light occurred and the demonic Dark Guild master could only stare in surprise as Makarov Dreyar now wielded a titanic axe forged of golden light and sparked from the lightning that came from his grandson's spell. Unison Raid. Jarnbjorn, Wind Magic, Tornado Wall. The defensive wind spell formed as quickly as it could, but it did little to hold back the might of a Unison Raid spell. The shield of swirling winds was torn through as if it were made of wet paper and Hades howled in agony as hundreds of thousands of amperes of current tore through his system. His nerves felt as if they were on fire and his skin reddened from the intense heat before a powerful bolt of azure and golden light carried him to ground zero. The island itself seemed to shake from the impact, a spiderweb of cracks marring the already ruined battleground as lances of lightning and light raced out from the point of impact. "Now stay down," Laxus roared. Even if it was a Unison Raid spell, even if it was one of the most powerful combination moves that could ever be made between these two S-class mages, Laxus would not believe the former master of fairy tale would be dead until he saw the body reduced to ashes. Lightning sparked and twisted within his outstretched hand before solidifying into the mighty weapon. The muscles in his arm contracted tightly as he reared back his arm, his eyes zeroed in on the target below him. Lightning magic. Heavenward halberd. With a mighty roar, the S-class mage threw the halberd as hard as he could. It raced towards Hades at breakneck speeds to the point that it appeared like a beam of blue light. As was the nature with most lightning magic spells, it was far too fast to be able to dodge. The light of the halberd washed over Hades's form as time seemed to slow, but he blinked in surprise as he realized that it wasn't just the adrenaline flowing through his system that brought about the effect as a violet magic seal formed between himself and Laxus's spell. Arc of time. Pause. The sound of his second-in-command's voice met his ears and Hades glanced up in time to see the tip of the lightning bolt a few centimeters away from his face. An orb of magic and symbols surrounded the halberd as it was frozen in time. "You're a good girl, Ultir." Ultir gave her guild master a small smile in response before turning to their ace. "Bluenode, get master out of there." On it, the gravity magic user moved towards Hades, but just as he grabbed onto Hades's arms to pull him out of the crater, the ground began to shift beneath the two. "What the foo?" Bluenode never got a chance to finish his exclamation as he choked on a mixture of sand and blood. Spikes of hardened sand erupted from the bowels of the earth, spearing through Bluenode's legs, spine and neck. The crimson life liquid didn't even have much of a chance to drip to the ground as the sand absorbed it. Hades was in a similar predicament, but unlike Bluenode, he was very much alive. As a result, the wizened dark mage was forced to endure the agony that came with having been impaled. Purple blood was soaked up by the spikes of sand as he was held in place by the weapons of granulated earth. Ultir, Meridi and Caprico turned to the two sand users of the group, seeing that Gaara was the primary culprit due to the positioning of his outstretched hand. They never even had an opportunity to voice their exclamations before they were wrapped by giant sand arms courtesy of Shukaku. A wall of sand then rose up in front of the other kin of purgatory before Shukaku gave the Arc of Time user what looked like an apologetic gaze. "This might hurt a bit. Shukaku, what are you doing?" The dark-haired mage's answer came in the form of a painful impact with the ground. With her focus now lost, the effect of pausing time on Laxus's spell vanished. The heavenward halberd regained its movement and a powerful dome of light and electricity expanded out from the point of contact. Hades and Bluenode were caught in the heart of the explosion and an electrical shockwave tore the land asunder. The sand wall remained strong against the explosion, but the force was still enough to cause a spiderweb of cracks to decorate its surface. After a number of seconds, the resulting cloud of dust TLE and Shukaku dropped the defensive structures to reveal the massive crater that formed from Laxus's spell. All that remained of the two most powerful members of Grimoire Heart were a pair of blackened and charred corpses. Shukaku released a low whistle in recognition of the level of destruction. Golden eyes shifted to stare at the red-haired sand magic user. "Told you we wouldn't be able to jump out of the way in time." Gaara remained stoic, but the faintest hint of a pout could be seen on his face. "Shukaku, Gaara, what are you doing?" Ultir's face was red with fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Of course we know what we've done," the Tanuki-like Exceed replied. "We're betraying you." "I thought our relationship with Grimoire Heart wasn't strong enough to use betrayal to describe what we are doing." Semantics. The youngest of the nine waved a paw in a nonchalant manner. "Betraying? But why?" Merity exclaimed. It's a simple reason of just getting things into place for when the brat arrives. You mean? Ultir's dark-colored eyes widened. Fujin is coming here, now? The Fujin, Merity and Caprico looked between Ultir, Gaara and Shukaku, clearly lost as to what was just happening in front of them. He will arrive in a number of moments. Gaara informed the three kin of Purgatory. He may fly faster than sound, but that is still a great distance to cover between here and his base. Though I'll be honest, making the decision as to leave the kid alive was a bit iffy. I am still in favor of crushing her here and now. Merity's eyes widened. What do you mean? Well, given that things are about to go sideways, I think it'll be fun to let the cat out of the bag, wouldn't you say? Shukaku, you fucking bastard, don't you dare. Like you're in any position to make demands. Ultir. Shukaku chuckled as he registered the shocked look on the daughter of Ur's face. The main goal here is to wipe out Grimoire Heart and take your resources. Now normally, we would have killed you all signs for the goat here since he's a celestial spirit and thus immortal. Though that's besides the fact that there's a plan held in store for the Golden Key spirits themselves. What are you talking about? Caprico's normally even tone of voice held an uncharacteristic edge to it. He was used to being the one holding the cards, not the other way around. What plan?
A story for another time. Golden eyes shone with amusement at the goat spirit's slightly emotional state. Anyway, Ultir here was offered a chance to join the Fujin and Kyuubi, and lo and behold, she was considering it. You were going to leave us. Leave me, Ul-chan. The look of betrayal on Merity's face was practically heartbreaking, and that expression amplified when Ultir refused to meet her gaze. Yup, Ul-chan here was ready to leave your little self behind while she ran off into the big strong arms of her blonde savior. The Ikibi no Tanuki cackled as he could practically feel the flames of conflict sparking between the three. With that in mind, I thought he might hold a bit of a soft spot for her, so I kept her alive. You on the other hand. Shukaku shifted his gaze to Merity. You hold no value in the long run. Gaara here would kill you without batting an eye, but I'm not much for killing kids, especially when they've been manipulated and taken advantage of by those in a position of power to do so. I still believe she should die. Sand flowed from Gaara's gourd in a menacing fashion and Merity could only tear up as Shukaku's sand arms still restrained her. By the dragons, you're so fucked up. Shukaku sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. But yeah, so that answers your questions. Any more? Nope. Good. Then we'll just wait here for the brat and Kurama to arrive before we leave with you three. Laxus touched down beside his grandfather and the two looked at each other in confusion before turning to the group of dark mages.
What the fuck? Laxus's words caught the attention of the two moles.
Shukaku and Gaara turned away from their captives, their own looks of confusion being directed towards the S-class mages. What do you want, brat? Can't you see we're in the middle of something here? What is going on here? Makarov asked. As I said before, Gaara and I. The Ikibi gestured to the impaled figures of Hades and Blue Note. We're not on their side.
What? The disbelief on Laxus and Makarov's faces made Shukaku roll his eye.
The original order was to hold off from killing Hades and letting Fujin take his head, but I think this was the right call. Shukaku glanced at the restrained kin of Purgatory. It was stupid of me to let you all even get this far simply because I was ordered to let it all happen. One little cog shifting out of place by our hands and we could have brought this entire operation burning to the ground before it even started. Fujin and Kurama are going to be quite annoyed. Gaara commented. Fuck them. The Tanuki-like Exceed snorted. They should thank me for getting this bullshit out of the way so they can focus on the important parts of their little master plan. A tired sigh brought the entire conversation to a halt, and all eyes shifted to the source of the sigh. I knew you and Gaara could not be trusted, little Tanuki, but to think you would actually go out of your way to deliver a killing blow. The sickening sound of flesh and bone shifting echoed through the air as the burnt to a crisp corpse of Hades began to move. All eyes watched in disgust mixed with fascination as his burnt body fell apart only to then be immediately replaced with freshly regrown bone, muscle and skin. Master Purhito. Makarov's body shook with legitimate fear at what he had just witnessed. What have you done to yourself? I've made a deal with the devil. It's as simple as that, was the Grimoire Heart Master's curt reply. Much better. Now then I believe the matter of betrayal is to be addressed. Caprico, would you be so kind as to? Gaara. Shukaku's unspoken order was followed as Gaara was immediately wrapped in a portion of Shukaku's sands. Pale green eyes became shining gold with star-shaped pupils as Shukaku's own Eternano melded with Gaara's to achieve his coveted Ikibi Moto. With a bestial roar, the ground cracked heavily as Gaara launched himself at the spirit of the goat. As one of the best close combat fighters amongst the 12 Golden Key spirits, Caprico did manage to block the charge, but the force of the strike was still enough to send both combatants vanishing into the forestry of Tenro Island. Still a bloodthirsty beast to the end, isn't he? Hades rolled his neck before snapping his head in the direction of Merity. Merity, go after them. Assist Caprico and kill Gaara. Yes, master. As Merity ran after her fellow kin of Purgatory, the Centennial Mage raised his head and looked to the Biju Exceed. I believe it is time we have a little chat, Tanuki. The devil's eye shone menacingly and a violet-black aura of magic energy sprung forth around the dark mage. Yeah, we're not doing that. Shukaku's eyes glowed as he unleashed his own killing intent in response to Hades's. The ground rumbled and the hard earth softened. It swirled around Shukaku's form and within seconds, the Ikibi unveiled his true form to the humans below. I'm finishing this now. My thoughts exactly. Hades replied. Command Center FKS Terumi. What the fuck? Lieutenant General Alice Brosnan summed up every Rune Knight's thoughts in 3 simple words as they witnessed the sudden appearance of a giant tanuki that seemed to be made of sand. Isn't that one of those beasts that fought the Kyuubi? Does that mean the others are here too? Are they with Grimoire Heart? Forget that. What about what happened to Makarov and Laxus? They were getting beaten around for a moment out there. Something flung around Makarov in his full Titan form like he was made of pillow fluff. Grand General. Lahar did his best to remain composed, but beads at his temples. The sounds of combat, the shouts and cries of his crew, all of it was white noise to him. Grand General. Tyson shook his superior officer roughly by the shoulders. Grand General Lahar, I know what you're thinking. The situation is the dictionary definition of foobar, but still, you gotta say something. Anything. The Grand General looked around the room, his subordinates looking directly back at him.
What's the plan, sir? One navigation officer did her best to maintain a steady tone, but her voice easily cracked with fear.
The plan. His chest felt tight and his glasses slipped from his face slightly as the sweat began to accumulate across his face. The plan is.
With the plasma shield compromised, there would only be so much left they could do to defend the left flank.
The evacuation of said left flank was near completion according to the last progress report, but that now put them at a disadvantage when it came to overall firepower as now there were tens of ships literally like sitting ducks. With 4 S-class mages on the scene, surely they could attempt some sort of counterattack, but saying this Titan's appearance throwing a wrench into any sort of strategy he could formulate was an understatement at this point.
This was a legitimate monster of magic, a beast that as far as they knew, equaled the Onibi Myobu in both height and power. The Magic Council was prepared to deal with the threat of a dark guild and had what they believed to be the appropriate amount of firepower to do so. But there was no way in hell were they prepared to deal with something of this magnitude. But they didn't come here to fight monsters. They came here to fight humans. Humans who were hell-bent on causing chaos in their kingdom, and that was what they were going to do. Lahar took a deep breath and slapped his cheeks hard. The loud sound echoed throughout the room and the now red-faced Grand General turned a resolute face back to his startled crew. The plan. He shook his head, forcing down the myriad of thoughts of everything that could go wrong, down. The plan is the same. The bespectacled Rune Knights turned his head, his dark eyes staring through the glass of the Terumi's superstructure and focusing on the hovering airships. We're here to take down Grimoire Heart. Sir, you heard me. Lahar adjusted his glasses, the light reflecting bright off his lenses. We fight on as we always have. We are the defenders of not just the kingdom, but of the continent of Ishgar. Now adjust those cannons and fire on the enemy. Aye, sir. The crew chorused loudly. A stiff nod was their reply and a chuckle escaped the lips of the hat-wearing Major General beside him. Something to say, Tyson? Got away with words, boss. HN. A snort of amusement accompanied the smirk on the Grand General's face. Grand General Lahar, I know you just gave a morale boost with that nice little speech and all, but… Lahar and Tyson turned in the direction of the radar monitoring staff as they parted slightly to give their superiors a view of the screens. 5 blinking red dots in V formation appeared behind the Fiorian fleet. Oh fuck. Tenro Island. What, you think 5 Jupiters are enough to handle me? Shukaku snorted in amusement. In your dreams. I'm well aware of the magnitude of power the 9 possess and I've taken the necessary precautions to ensure I would be able to fend you off. The Centennial Mage's normal eyes shone with confidence. The first step of course being that 10 Jupiter cannons would be enough to give me some time to advance to step 2. Altair, if you would be so kind. 10. But you only… Fire. The communication lacrima in Altair's hands released a faint teal glow to signal its activation. The Ichibe's eyes widened, his ears twitching as he registered the familiar hum and whine that came with Jupiter cannons quickly charging. The purple orbs of concentrated Eternano shone brightly in front of him as the 5 airships before him prepared to attack with their most powerful weapons, but it was the additional sounds that caught his ears, originating from several kilometers directly behind him. His head snapped in the opposite direction. 5 twinkling lights akin to stars shone in the distance and the cries of the 5 additional Jupiter cannons reached a fever pitch within moments. A pincer attack from 10 Jupiter cannons was not the most ideal situation. 10 large beams of pure magic-based destruction raced across the Fiorian Sea with such speed and force that the waters far below were disrupted. All 10 aimed directly at the impossibly large target that was the Ichibe no Tanuki. Defense was his forte and combined with his legendary stubbornness, it made Shukaku to be quite an annoying foe to take down. Those were the words of his very own Kitsune of a brother. However, despite his tenacity and endurance, he was still the youngest, and so when it came to threats directed at their baby brother, Yuki, and even the shy Isobu, it was something that would not be tolerated. Bijudama. The surface tension of the Fiorian Sea shattered with explosive force as the two Biju Exceed burst forth from their stations beneath the waves. Red negative Eternano and blue positive Eternano combined within their respective maws to become tight spheroids of purple-black. With a mighty roar, the Sanbi and Hachibi unleashed their respective tailed beast bombs, the beams of reddish-white rocketing through the air and meeting the Jupiter cannon blasts midway. The heavens themselves seemed to quake from the collision of high-intensity energies. The Bijudama and the Jupiters struggled for dominance, pushing back against each other with the hopes of completely overpowering the other. However, the outputs from the opposing attacks could only withstand so much before they destabilized. The world was engulfed in blinding white light for a brief moment before twin explosions of multicolored energy occurred as a result of the power struggle. The resulting shock waves accompanied the towers of water and steam, droplets falling like rain. The Fiorian Sea shook violently, and unfortunately for several of the abandoned ships that were caught up in the blast radius, they capsized. Those with crew members aboard were placed on the verge of capsizing as massive waves battered their hulls, but luckily were able to stabilize themselves. Hades stared with shock mixed with self-righteous fury, while the rest of his guild merely stared in shock. The massive Sanbi and Hachibi revealed themselves from their hiding places beneath the waves, their eyes glowing with power as they stared down the airships in the distance. "My guns are bigger than yours. Don't get cocky, rodent." Hades' challenge to Shukaku's overconfident boast towards the power of his brothers made the golden-eyed Tanuki twist his expression into one of confusion. Once again, loud whine and hums met his ears, but rather than it being the sounds of a Jupiter cannon being activated, it was something else entirely. The two groups of 5 airships shifted into a practiced formation before large attachments sprung forth from various portions of each one, connecting them to each other. Hydraulics and mechanics adjusted themselves until they finally forged 2 of the most monstrous feats of magic-based weapons technology since the satellite square. Etherion. Command Center FKS Ikaruga, Fiorian Sea. What the hell? Whoa, look at that. Are those mechas? Unable to support the cumulative weight of their combined forms, the 2 titans of steel dropped into the sea. Massive waves raced across the surface and the Ikaruga shifted greatly, but that did little to deter the fascination of the battleship's commanding officer. The aqua-blue eyes of Lieutenant General Ernesti Doma sparkled with inappropriate levels of wonder as he gazed upon the titanic mechanic marvels. Woo-ah! So cool! His outburst led to many a crew member within the command center to groan with annoyance at their superior officer. Part female twin captains who stood by his side, their audible groans seeming to echo through the command center. "Chan, now is not the time for your geeking out sessions. Come on, man. You're Lieutenant General of this ship, act like it." But Addy, kid, look at Theme. The fraternal twin captains, Adeltrud and Arkad Olter, affectionately referred to as Addy and Kid by those who got to know them, gave the silver-haired Lieutenant General a deadpan stare in response. "Maybe Gurinji-sama was too lenient with you when you were growing up, Ernesti. Using my deceased grandfather against me is a low blow, kid. I'm not using him against you, but if he were alive, you know he would not be approving of you fawning over the enemy's new giant mechanical weapons in the middle of an attack. Addy, I thought you loved me." "I do. Chan." Very much. A bright smile adorned the beautiful brown-haired captain's face for all of a millisecond as it was replaced with a disapproving glare. "But we are currently in a war. Get your act together, especially when we have non-rune knights present." "I'm so confused." Levi, Gajeel, Natsu, Lucy and Happy spoke in unison as they witnessed the scene before them. Arkad gave a small bow to the fairy tale mages. "I'm sorry you have to see our Lieutenant General being such an idiot." "No, that's fine, we deal with idiots on a regular basis." Lucy waved off the blatant insult to a high-ranking officer of the Rune Knight Corps. "What I'm actually confused about is, and I'm sorry if I offend you, Lieutenant General, are you a boy or a girl?" Ernesti's shoulders drooped slightly as dragged a hand down his face. Throughout his entire life, Ernesti was not the most masculine of characters despite being born male. Due to his silky smooth skin, round face, shining hair, lithe frame, short 5 feet 5 stature and feminine voice, all of it culminated into Ernesti Doma developing what many would refer to as an androgynous appearance. "He's a guy," Natsu and Gajeel stated immediately. "Yes," Ernesti grinned toothily. "I knew my manliness would shine through one day." "Nah, you still look girly," Gajeel responded. "Gurk," Ernesti choked on any follow-up words he may have had. "Yeah, Kuragane's right, you do." The salamander of fairy tale nodded in agreement. "But you smell like a guy." "Why are you smelling my Chan?" Adeltrud gasped. "Are you in love with him too?" The 2 Dragonslayers raised their eyebrows as the curvaceous captain pulled the shorter Lieutenant General into the comforting embrace of her bosom. Unfortunately, that was neither comfortable nor soft as she ended up slamming Ernestine's face into her breastplate, quite painfully. A collective wince was released by the crew as flesh met steel. Ow. Chan, your beautiful face, Levi sighed, running a hand through her blue locks. I guess this is what they mean when they say never meet your heroes. Meet your heroes? The Iron Dragonslayer shifted his crimson eyes to the solid script magic user. You know about this guy, Squirt? Actually, don't answer that, of course you do. Who is he? Levi-chan. Ernesti Doma, she answered. He's the grandson of Gurin Doma, the late head of the Magic Council who died in Era during the Kyuubi attack. Though he wasn't much of a frontline fighter, he was quite a genius when it came to weapons and technological advancements for the Corp. In fact, he was the one who created and improved upon the plasma shields they were currently using. Unfortunately, a downside to his fascination with anything tech-related is that whether it be the enemy or an ally, he gets easily distracted and loses his current train of thought very easily. Arkad sighed. It's endearing until you find yourself pinned down behind a rock waiting for him to give orders, but he's too busy admiring the armor plating on the magic four-wheelers that some dark mages had. In my defense, that plating was very interesting. Ernesti wrenched himself free from Adaltrud's embrace and looked to the male older twin. It was deflecting our attacks, and if it wasn't for my fascination, then we wouldn't have figured out how to beat them. Speaking of interesting.
The lieutenant general turned his aqua-colored eyes in the direction of the new grimoire hard weapons. What's the plan, Chan? That's a good question, Addy. Ernesti replied to the female older twin. A very good question indeed. Lieutenant General. Ernesti was forced to set aside the current conversation as a rune knight called out to him. Contact from the Terumi. Grand General Lahar is on. The androgynous rune knight then noticed a flash of teal-colored light as the communication lockrima at his workstation was being activated. He placed a hand atop the orb and pumped his magic energy into the device. This is Grand General Lahar issuing a fleet-wide command. Earlier aboard my vessel, I issued an earlier command that we were to continue fighting Grimoire Heart with everything we had, but there has now been a change in the current situation, as I am sure everyone is aware. Lahar paused briefly as he took an audible breath. Once all ships have completed the task of receiving the evacuees from the left flank ships, I am ordering all ships to fall back so as to not be caught in the crossfire of what is obviously going to be a literal clash of titans. Juvia Loxer, Grey Fullbuster and Urza Scarlet of Fairy Tail have been given orders to assist with this process. Well, that explains why Grey and Juvia left with Urza when we were helping with the flank evacuation. Levi stated. This is not a full retreat, for I still believe we can do something to continue making any and all attempts to slow down or destroy what we know are the Grimoire hard weapons. The three giant beasts, I cannot say whether they are our allies or enemies, but it does seem like they are against Grimoire Heart due to the way they cancelled out the Jupiter cannons. Now I repeat, all engines into full reverse and fall back. The Ikaruga's crew followed the Grand General's command and the engines roared as they were placed in full reverse. Ernesti's eyes remained trained on the mechas as they began to distance themselves from Tenro Island's coastline. The shining blue orbs seemed to scan the twin titans of steel, and within 30 seconds, another report of Grand General Lahar calling to the Ikaruga was announced.
Ernesti, I believe that was sufficient time to get a look at our new foes? You know me too well, Lahar-kun. Ernesti laughed lightly as he ran a hand through his silver hair once more. But yes, I've gotten a pretty good look at the mechas. What do you have for me? From what I could see, that thing is at least 220 feet tall. Overall combat capabilities have all been boosted significantly, I'm sure, because given that they are formed from combining the airships into one, it would be most disappointing from an engineering standpoint if the defensive capabilities were the same as a normal airships. Offensive-wise, probably the same weapons, and not to mention they now have close quarters advantage if they decided to blitz the fleet. The only options we currently have at our disposal if we want to continue to pour on the offensive would be to take aim at any possibly weak spots, particularly gaps in the armor plating and joint areas, given that the mechas are humanoid in their overall shape. Any possible way we can pinpoint the location of the power source and take aim there? I can only hypothesize at this point, but given that a large amount of power would be needed to keep the mechas moving, it is likely they are using the lacrima used for the Jupiter cannons and repurposing them. However, I do not believe that the locations of the lacrimas, due to their size, would not be able to be shifted significantly. You got all that just from looking at it? Levi asked. My dream in life is to actually create something like that. Primarily why I joined the Corp was so I could end up getting funding to make a mecha of my own. Ernesti, this should be saying to your superior officer. Lahar sighed, and Ernesti could not help but laugh at the younger man's annoyance. You're just honest to a fault, aren't you? Luce's rhetorical question was spoken with a deadpan tone. I guess. The silver-haired rune knight shrugged before turning back to the communication lacrima. Though, Lahar-kun, if at all possible, do you think we may be able to launch a salvage request should we succeeding in defeating the mechas? Provided that there will be anything left, I can grant you permission to retrieve any pieces of the mechas afterwards. You're the best Grand General Fury has, Lahar-kun. I'm the only Grand General Fury has, Ernesti. Ernesti chuckled as he could practically hear Lahar rolling his eyes at him through the teal-colored lacrima. We will follow your analysis and make a concentrated barrage on the joint areas. In addition to this, we have a cause for concern as Makarov-sama and Laxus have yet to make any sort of report as to their current status ever since they were assaulted by the dark mage that came from one of the airships. Don't sweat it, Natsu replied to the young rune knight. It's Ji-chan and Laxus, they're strong as hell. I am not doubting their strength, Natsu-san, but you saw the way Makarov-sama was flung through the air in his full Titan form. Natsu frowned, having no retort to that kernel of truth. I am sure that you and your guild members are also worrying about them both, so I have ordered the formation of a joint strike team to go to Tenro Island. The members from Fairy Tail have already been confirmed to be yourself, Natsu, along with Urza-sama, Gray, Gajeel and Juvia. My Lieutenant General, Alice Brosnan, and Major General Tyson Hammer will go along with the twins, Captains Adeltrud and Arkad Older. Sir, the twins stood a bit straighter upon being addressed. Finally letting me out to play. Please do not make light of the situation, Natsu, as this is no game. Your master and guildmate are in very real danger and you must prepare yourself should the worst case scenario come to pass. The Fairy Tail mages aboard the Ikaruga frowned deeply, glaring at the communication lacrima as a replacement for Lahar. If they were standing in front of him, Natsu would have given the Grand General one of his famous burning right hook to the face and no one in Fairy Tail would have faulted him for it. The mission involving U9 is to find and retrieve Makarov and Laxus Drayar. Yes sir, the older twins saluted to the communication lacrima. We're on it, the Dragonslayers of Iron and Fire nodded firmly. Tenro Island. The waves crashed harshly against the legs of the two mechas. Their black, violet and silver color scheme made a stark contrast to the afternoon sunlight. The sounds of their mechanics whirring seemed to echo across Tenro's airspace as the mechas raised their massive arms and their claw-like fingers curled inwards to form tight fists. The eyes of the mechas shone with a brilliant violet light and the eyes of the Biju exceed all narrowed, bestial growls coming from the backs of their throats as they registered the threat before them. Shukaku turned back to the master of Grimoire Heart, unbridled rage present in his golden eyes. Of course you would be the one to make a giant mech. I thought your appearances were the only similarities, but you sure make it seem like you are Faust's counterpart. I don't even know who that is. Hades remarked. You'll find out when I send you back to the pits of hell where you came from. The Ichibi unleashed a burst of magic energy and the sand beneath Hades' feet sprung up around him, but before the granulated earth could wrap him in a bone-crushing embrace, a dark violet-red magic seal formed around the demon bloodholder. Flame magic. Samsara. Violet-black flames emerged from the magic seal and the blazing temperatures quickly turned the sands into glass. Hades stamped his foot on the ground, a powerful shockwave racing out from the point of impact and shattering the wall of glass into pieces. You will have to try harder than that to kill me, but at this point in time I have other matters to attend to. Ultier.
Karen and Cerberus, engage. With the command from the younger Milkovich twin, the lights of the eyes in both mechas flashed and their massive legs shifted in unison. For such hefty pieces of metal, they moved with surprising speed as they charged towards the Sanbi and Hachibi. Shukaku's eyes narrowed and he extended his geokinetic reach to the seabed in front of his elder siblings. The waters sprung forth along with the heavy walls of wet sand that came to the aids of Yuki and Isobu. The knee joints of the two robots bent and the waters bubbled as extreme levels of heat were unleashed beneath their feet. The Karen and Cerberus units leapt high into the air, and with the additional level of thrust given to them by the rockets under their feet, they were capable of clearing the massive walls. The two robots met one another in midair, planting their feet against each other before pushing off each other and slamming devastating kicks against the backs of Isobu and Yuki and sent the two members of the Nine skidding across the Fjorine Sea. The two massive mechas then turned their eyes upon the Ichibi, his own visual organs wide in shock at what he just witnessed. Taking advantage of that surprise, the Cerberus raised its arms and an aura of dark violet magic energy cloaked said upper limbs. Mechanics shifted and the two clawed hands of the Cerberus morphed into what seemed to be a pair of massive jaws. The jaw hands of the Cerberus rocketed towards Shukaku, clamping tightly down upon the Tanuki's sand-like flesh. What the hell? Shukaku's surprise grew even further as the tightly wound titanium cables which connected the jaw hands to the Cerberus's wrists retracted. Shukaku soon found himself being pulled through the air and once his feet no longer touched the surface of Tenro, the jaw hands released him from their clutches. But as he was released, the Karen stepped forward and a pair of ebony scythe blades sprung forth from compartments in the mech's forearms. In one smooth motion, the Karen sliced through Shukaku's torso, effectively splitting him in two as if he were made of butter. Both parts of Shukaku were about to crash into the Fjorine Sea, but Gyuki emerged from the depths and his lengthy tentacle-like tails stretched out and snatched his younger brother's halves out of the air with ease. You okay, Shukaku? The Hachibi asked as he put Shukaku's body back together, the sands easily reconnecting as if he had never been cut. Why yeah.
The star-shaped pupils of the Ichibi no Tanuki shone with annoyance. What the hell are those things? Shouldn't you be the one to know that? You've been our mole? Yeah, I know that asshole, but I mean, what the fuck are they that they can even move and kick us around like that? Shukaku exclaimed. Nobody can do that to us, nobody except, well, us. You have a point. From an engineering perspective, those things shouldn't even be able to move as quickly as they should, but I guess that's what you get when have the power output from 5 giant lacrima that are used to fire off Jupiter cannons. Yeah well, that's gonna change shit. I got the sandbeds under my control and they couldn't have picked a worse battleground to fight on given that water is Isobu's territory. Show him what we mean, Isobu. Responding the call of his younger brother, the Sanbi no Kyodai burst out of the depths and raised his forelimbs. Sweden. Hatu. Water and magic energy swirled within his palms before he thrust them forth to unleash the powerful pressurized blasts of water that made up the surging sea spell. Both water blasts rocketed towards the Karen and Cerberus, but the Cerberus immediately moved to counter as it raised its jaw hands. Dark-colored magic energy concentrated within the jaws before it was unleashed as powerful blasts of violet-black energy. The twin beams of dark eternanocuz of water which resulted in a massive explosion that formed an equally large tower of water. However, the water tower was quickly bisected as the Karen unleashed an arc of dark energy from slicing the air with one of its scythe blades. The attack raced towards the Sanbi at an incredible pace, but the three-tailed beast, while slow on land, was near unmatched in agility when in water. Thus, Isobu dove beneath the waves to avoid the strike while his siblings shifted to the side and watched Arc sail past them. The sounds of explosions and death cries met the ears of the Yushioni and Tanuki, causing their eyes to widen in surprise. They were so caught up in the battle that they failed to remember that there was an entire fleet of ships retreating behind them, a part of which were now smoldering wreckage as a result of the Karen's attack. Oh shit, I forgot about them. Shukaku couldn't help but comment. Same. Yuki gnashed his teeth in annoyance, but we have to protect them. Yeah, I know. Shukaku replied with a roll of his eyes. It's all a part of the long plan that Kurama and Naruto have. The two siblings quickly turned their heads back towards the two mechs as Isobu's rapidly pumping tails propelled him out of the water. Utilizing his momentum, the Sanbi rotated his body and lashed out with his 3 heavy tails, slapping the against the torso of the Cerberus and sending it rolling off to the side across the seabed. With its crew in a bit of disarray from being struck, the Cerberus clumsily tried to climb back to its feet only for a massive wave to crash against it, courtesy of the turtle-like beast. The Cerberus rolled once more, but this time it was able to capitalize on the momentum and rise back up into a stable position. With jaw hands raised, dark purple orbs of magic energy charged before being fired at the charging Sanbi. Kaganade. Isobu quickly curled into a ball, dark blue magic energy cloaking his form as he utilized his shadow stroke spell. The blasts of magic fired by the Cerberus were practically nothing in the wake of the spinning spiked shell that boasted to be harder than diamond. His movement remained uninhibited by the Cerberus's attack, and so he crashed against the mech's body with all the force that a 270-foot-tall sea monster could. Ricocheting off of the Cerberus sent the Sanbi skyward, and he unfurled his body to slam down upon the supine robot. However, the waters beneath the Cerberus began to steam and bubble as it activated the rocket thrusters under its feet, shifting its body through the water and causing the Sanbi no Kyodai to miss his target. The Cerberus then climbed back to its feet and with another push from the rocket thrusters, stretched out a jaw hand, clamping it down harshly on Isobu's hand as he raised it to protect himself. The second jaw hand struck, but Isobu raised his other hand to block that strike as well. However, the Cerberus remained vigilant, and so it raised Isobu's arms into the air to expose his unprotected head. With the roar of its rocket thrusters, the Cerberus unleashed a deadly knee strike to Isobu's chin. A roar of pain was elicited from the Sanbi as another knee strike caused his grip to slacken. The Cerberus then unveiled the level of strength it was truly capable of as it snaked its arms underneath Isobu, latching onto his throat and underbelly to then lift the massive sea monster over its head and hurl him through the air. Isobu splashed down, his head filled with cobwebs from the dizzying throw. His single eye widened as a bright purple glow washed over his body and he witnessed oncoming attacks from the mechs. The Karen had swiped its arms and twin blades of energy flew forth from the scythes on its forearms, accompanied by the twin blasts from Cerberus's jaw hands. However, the attacks did not land as a bombardment of energy blasts and artillery were sent on a collision course with them. In a bright explosion of light and fire, the Fiorian Kingdom ships had launched their counterattack/assist for the Biju Exceed. The 3 members of the 9 all looked between each other and the fleet behind them. Did they just save Isobu? Shukaku could not hide how flabbergasted he was. It seems they did. Yuki nodded. We owe the humans now. Do we really? Because we're basically doing fighting off these 2 robots which they obviously cannot do on their own. If anything, we're now beginning to break even with them. Shukaku has some bit of a point, Yuki ni-san. HN. The ox-like Biju Exceed snorted. His circular eyes then focused back on the mechs as they climbed back to a stable position. Well, that's new. Both mechs shifted and stood a bit straighter as their chest plates shifted to reveal 6 small cannon barrels. Each of the 12 barrels hummed and whined in a manner similar to that of a Jupiter cannon's charging, but it was far faster as they were already firing off the arcing beams of violet destruction. Shukaku summoned a wall of sand, but due to it being from that of the seabed, the sands were wet and thus unable to form a significantly stable structure. It held off several of the blasts, but the majority of the attacks punched through Shukaku's defenses like wet paper. Shit, this is why I hate working with wet sand, Shukaku snarled. The 2 large beasts quickly crossed their arms in front of their bodies and faces, enduring the powerful blasts of energy quite easily. But a string of curses escaped their lips as some of the attacks bypassed them and were on a collision course with the retreating Fiorian kingdom ships. Don't worry, Isobu rose from the seas and stretched out his armored tails to block the beams of violet energy. Good job, Isobu. The usually shy Sanbi laughed lightly, relishing in the praise from his younger brother. Said Sanbi quickly swam back over to the main area of the battle and the 3 Biju Exceed watched a concentrated bombardment from the ships was launched at the opposing mechs, nailing them directly in the torso where the exposed cannons were. A small explosion occurred as one of each of the 6 cannons the 2 mechs possessed were destroyed, but it did little to affect the overall firepower of the Karen and Cerberus as they continued to fire their energy cannons. Isobu, gimme cover, Yuki exclaimed. Okay. Isobu dove underwater before turning back around and pumping his tails and arms furiously to break through the water's surface and make himself airborne. Energy blasts from both ends were being launched as the mechs were being fired upon by the Rune Knights, but given the size of the members of the 9, it was practically inevitable that some element of friendly fire would occur. Good thing we're practically immortal or this would be really difficult, the 3 of them thought in unison. Amari. Both Shukaku and Yuki unleashed powerful blasts of crimson from their jaws, arcing through the air around Isobu to collide with the oncoming attacks from the 2 mechs. Though weaker than the Bijudama, the Amari spells were faster to make and were still able to their job of preventing the mechs' attacks from reaching Isobu, and the blast wave from the resulting explosions gave Isobu a little bit more airtime before he crashed beneath the waves.
Using Isobu's splash as a cover, Yuki charged and burst through the cloud of water in a surprise attack. His tentacle-like tails struck forth, wrapping themselves securely around the Karen mech's arms. With a harsh yank, Yuki pulled the Karen in closer which caused it to stumble into an already reared back fist. The devastating right hook landed home, but Yuki did not stop as he climbed atop the Karen and followed up with 2 more punches to the face. With his entire weight bearing down upon the mech, the Karen unit fell to its knees. Rikuden. Shukaku came from the left and slammed a strong fist against his belly, unleashing a powerful burst of wind and Eternano from his concave maw. The compressed blast of raging air currents slammed against the side of the Karen and caused it to tilt the opportunity to submerge the mechanical titan. The Ushioni-esque Biju Exceed raised a massive hand and slammed it down on the struggling Karen's head and began to apply pressure with the aim to completely crush its head. However, the Cerberus unit decided to intervene and fired off one of its jaw hands to nail a devastating punch to Yuki's left jaw. The bovine-esque Biju roared in annoyance and pain and his grip on the Karen slackened, allowing it activate its thruster systems and push itself back to its full height and also deliver a powerful slash with one of its forearm blades. The attack sliced off a tail and Yuki roared in pain as the tentacle fell to the ocean in a spray of blood. Yuki quickly ducked under a follow-up slash aimed to decapitate, but the energy blade that came from the slash was sent on its way to take down several of the fleet which lay behind him. They're really taking advantage of how we can't protect them and fight simultaneously.
That's the perks of being the villains, I guess.
Not now, Shukaku. The Hachibi channeled his annoyance at his youngest brother and lashed out with his tails. He crashed them against the side of the Karen, sending the bladed mech careening through the air before it was once again grounded by a powerful hammer-like swipe of Shukaku's tail. The tail then snaked its way around the Karen's torso and he raised the mechanical giant high over his head just as the Cerberus began to do battle with the Hachibi. The Cerberus blocked one of Yuki's punches and struck back with one of its own, nailing Yuki in the snout before following up with another to the temple which temporarily stunned the massive tentacle-tailed ox. However, that moment was all the Cerberus needed as it reared back its arm and a thruster revealed itself at the elbow. With the elbow rocket engaged, a burst of violet-blue flame propelled the arm forwards and crashed against Yuki for the ending of the 3-hit combo. Yuki tumbled through the seas, but his youngest brother would be the one to avenge him as Shukaku snarled and stampeded across the Fiorine seafloor, racing past his brother. The Ikibi roared and swung its tail to throw the captive Karen mech at its fellow mech. The Cerberus was hit with the Karen with enough force to cause a devastating shockwave. Both mechs tumbled across the Fiorine sea, causing the metal to dent and damage some pieces of circuitry as loud and unnatural roars of their inner mechanisms echoed through the battlefield. The mechs were able to quickly recover and stand upright, but the battle damage was done as evidenced by how the shoulder joint of the Karen was dented heavily and sparks were jumping off of the Cerberus's torso every few seconds.
That ought to have broken something, Shukaku chuckled. Maybe, but it hasn't taken them out yet. Yuki snarled as he pulled himself upright. He looked at the bleeding stump that used to be his tail and frowned. It's been a while since I lost a tail.
Not really something to worry about. True. This was then evidenced by a quickly application of magic as the tentacle-like tail regrew like an actual cephalopod's tentacle. Shukaku, can't you hold them down with the sand? Yuki asked. Using Sabaku Q and Sabaku Soso would be most helpful since basically crushing them seems like an easy method to get this over with. You think I haven't been trying? Shukaku snapped. This is the reason why I don't like the seafloor. The sand is too wet and I can't get it to form a stable structure like I can with dry sand. The best I can manage are the sand walls for defense, but I can't make something complex like my mausoleums or spikes unless the sand is dry.
I thought you said the sand beds were under your control, Yuki scoffed. Shukaku turned slightly red in embarrassment as he did indeed make that claim.
Just shut the fuck up and let's kill these bastards.
Forest Western Coastline, Tenro Island. The joint strike force of Rune Knights and Fairy Tale Mages finally managed to make landfall on Tenro's western edge.
Did we really have to take such a long route to get here? Natsu grumbled.
Oh, I'm sorry, did you want to be the one to avoid active laser cannons and bullets while also avoiding the attacks from 3 giant monsters and 2 mechs? Tyson's sarcasm was apparent as he raised an eyebrow at the rose-haired Dragonslayer.
Well, I mean, we're pretty good flyers. Natsu shrugged as he looked to the 3 Exceed and Urza. We can practically fly faster than the speed of sound once we push ourselves, and by we, I mean those of us who can fly. No, I can't, Natsu. Oh. Natsu replied intelligently to Urza's words. Well, Happy and the other Exceed are expert flying cats. They could do it. Said Exceed turned to Natsu with deadpan stares. WH what? Chojuro stammered, his anxiety levels spiking as he envisioned himself trying to avoid an untimely demise on a battlefield.
Natsu-san, Juvia does not think your level of optimism is healthy for Chojuro-san. The Water Dragonslayer stated as she acted to console her Exceed partner. Yes, Salamander, don't be an idiot. Gajeel scoffed. Lily's a badass and even more badass than your cat, but even I'm not gonna send Lily through that. All eyes followed the direction Gajeel pointed in as the battleground was a mixture of bestial roars, mechanical parts working, cannons firing and explosions. He's got a point, Natsu. Adultrude and Arkad nodded in unison. I agree. Tyson looked back over to the location of the fleet. In addition to needing to avoid friendly fire, there's also very high-level spells being fired off from those beasts and the mechs. There's a high likelihood that we would have died in the process of taking a shorter route involving us passing through that. See, dumbass, this is why you're not S-class and I am. As if you didn't rub that in enough, Frostbite, you're S-class because you played tricks, not because you're stronger. You wanna go? Let's go. Stop that. Urza stood between the 2 hot-blooded males. Her glare very much more intense than her previous glares of disappointment. Gray. Natsu. This isn't the time to be bickering and getting into playful scuffles. We are here to perform a search and rescue mission for Master and Laxus. This is practically an S-class mission, and you cannot afford to be doing what you normally do on quests. We have more lives at risk here, so get your acts together. Sorry, Urza. Good. The red-headed wizard saint turned to the lieutenant general of the team. Alice, you want to give the orders? You are basically the highest-ranking official here. You would be actually, Urza-sama. Alice chuckled. You're probably still not used to it, but a wizard saint is practically equal in status to a grand general, and so if you were to be stationed on a battlefield, outside of the grand generals and the supreme commander, you'd be the one giving the orders. Oh. Urza's eyes sparkled with newfound wonder as she looked at the wizard saint badge that was attached to her breastplate. Then I guess I'm in charge then. Aye sir, Urza-sama. The other Rune Knights saluted to the crimson-haired mage while the fairy tale mages could only shiver at the thought of how Urza could hold so much power. Well then, the format of the team will be as follows. Natsu, Juvia and Gajeel will lead the party. With your enhanced senses, particularly your sense of smell, you can pick up Master's and Laxus's scents and track them. Gray, Tyson and the older twins will follow after. Alice and I will bring up the rear. Urza then turned to the Exceed trio. Happy, Panther Lily and Chojuro. Please wait here on the coastline for us when we return. If something goes wrong, either Alice or myself will launch a signal into the air and you are to leave us and report to both Lahar and Gildarts about the situation. Aye sir. Happy saluted to the Titania of Fairy Tale. Good cats. Urza smirked as she patted each one on the head. The young wizard saint then turned back to the strike force. Rian is to search and rescue. If we have to fight, then we fight, but saving Master and Laxus are the main priorities. A stiff nod was her reply from each of her compatriots. Alright, let's move out.